3D Sonic games tend to be a bit of a hot topic in the gaming sphere. If you ask people what they thought about the games, you'd get vastly different opinions. Some people may tell you the adventure games are still the best in the series, and that nothing has ever topped the Child Garden, but then others might tell you the 3D Sonic games were just never good to begin with, and that the only decent ones were Colors, Generations, or maybe Frontiers 2. Or if you look really deep into the Sonic fanbase, you'll find people praising games like UnWiished, Shadow the Hedgehog, Black Knight, even 06 of all things, games that have gotten a lot of flack over the years. Now, as somebody that's been a lifelong Sonic fan, I heavily grew up with 3D Sonic games, and I've always been very passionate about them, to the point where I've always wanted to make videos talking about them for a really long time. However, even just editing one video usually takes a nauseating amount of time for me to make. Combine that with me not enjoying the editing process much, and YouTube never really being my main hobby to begin with, I never really pushed myself to make those videos. Still though, I really wanted to get my opinions out there somehow, even if I made just one video that I could be happy with. So, I decided screw it, why not talk about all the 3D Sonic games? Or at least the ones I've played, which thankfully is most of them. Though there are still a couple I haven't played, those games being Dream Team and Rise of Lyric. Dream Team I haven't played because it's only available on Apple devices for some reason, and I don't own any, so I literally can't play it. As for Rise of Lyric on the other hand, I never had interest in playing it. Even when I first watched the announcement trailer back in the day, something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. I think it was the music that I found kinda obnoxious, and the redesigns were just not appealing to me. Because of that, I ended up never getting the game, which if I'm being completely honest, I'm kinda glad I didn't. Besides that though, I've pretty much played every other 3D Sonic title. Once again, I'm very passionate about these games, so I thought it'd be kinda fun to talk about all of them in this sorta end-all, be-all essay video for myself. Now, before I start rambling about my thoughts on these games, I want to explain how this video is going to be structured first. Pretty much, I'm going to go through each 3D Sonic game individually, talking about my general thoughts on them. I don't want to go into absolutely every little detail possible, or else this video would be even longer than it already is. That doesn't mean I won't go very in depth if I feel like it though, because I most certainly will in some cases, especially if it's a game I really care about. Because of that, there will likely be some games I have more to say on than others too, but I feel like that's to be expected when making a video on so many games anyways. Another thing to note is that I'm going to be ranking these games on a tier list with 3 different set of tiers. Top tier is obviously reserved for games that I absolutely love and truly have a fun time playing. And because I am a Sonic fan, I would consider these to be some of my all-time favorite video games. The middle tier is for games I feel are pretty solid experiences, definitely games I can get some enjoyment out of, but not quite on the same level as the top tier games, likely due to having flaws that bother me more, or just not reaching the same highs as the games above do. The low tier is, well, for games I don't really like all that much. Maybe I can enjoy a couple levels in them, but overall, not really games I consider all that fun on the whole. I'm mainly doing this because I still want to rank these games to some extent. Heck, I originally wanted to make this a countdown list, but I didn't really like the idea of ranking the games in a specific order. All I really wanted to get across is whether or not I really like a game or really don't. I'll still try to rank these games in order anyways, but don't take it too seriously, I'm just gonna go with my gut. As long as 2 games are in the same tier, I probably like them on a similar or equal level. Also, I realized I recorded most of my footage through streaming on Twitch and OBS. So, because of that, the footage probably looks a bit blurry, which I didn't really think about till it was a bit too late. I hope that doesn't affect the quality of the video too much or is unwatchable, if anyone even cares to begin with. Also, there will be spoilers in this video for pretty much every game I'll be discussing, so if you don't want to be spoiled by a particular game, I'd recommend skipping past those games entirely. Okay. Just one more thing I want to mention before we start. Remember that everything I say here is just my opinion. If you like a game that I dislike or vice versa, please don't take it too personally. Everyone has their own tastes and dislikes, and I don't want to come off like whatever I'm saying is the objectively correct opinion or whatever. Sure, I may get passionate for things I like or don't like, but I don't want anyone watching to feel bad for the way they think or for liking a game I don't. Even I'll admit that the games I enjoy here are not perfect by any means, but that doesn't mean it's wrong to enjoy them, and the same can be said for anyone else's favorite games. Just please, remember to keep that in mind while watching the video. Anyways, with that finally being said, I think it's time we start talking about these games, starting with the very first mainline 3D Sonic game in the series, Alright, so I'll admit, we're already starting off with the game I'm very biased towards. Sonic Adventure was the first Sonic game I ever played. In fact, it was one of the first games I've ever played, period. Some of my earliest childhood memories I have are with this game, so yeah, I definitely have some nostalgia for this one. Despite that though, I still think this game is pretty damn sick, even looking past my nostalgia for it. I mean, just to start things off, I think Sonic Adventure's core gameplay has actually held up pretty well, or at least it's a lot better than people give it credit for, especially if we're talking about Sonic specifically. I think its core controls and movement is some of the most fun and fluid in the entire series. The momentum feels exactly how you'd expect a classic Sonic game to play in 3D. It generally feels amazing. On top of that, Sonic Spin Dash is also broken as hell in this game. You can pretty much spam it like crazy, making it so you can constantly keep your speed up throughout the stage. You can also use it to do crazy speedrun tricks or find secrets, like spin dashing off a slope to gain more height and distance. Maybe you can argue it's a bit too overpowered now, but I guess for me, I find it so fun to use that I just don't really care. It's easily my favorite iteration of the spin dash. Sonic's campaign also has some of my very top favorite levels in the entire franchise. Emerald Coast, Red Mountain, Speed Highway, Final Egg, and Twinkle Park are just peak 3D Sonic experiences to me. So much to explore and so many shortcuts for speedruns, and the set pieces are just so memorable too. As for the other characters in the game, I think they're still pretty fun as well, for the most part. Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are characters I find really fun because they all have unique platforming abilities that makes each one stand out. Tails can fly around really fast and can even descend to land quicker, something I wish Tails could do in the classic Sonic games. Knuckles can glide and climb around like he could in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Amy could use her hammer jump to do cool little tricks and skips in the levels. As for Gamma, I think his stages are pretty alright too, though maybe a tad too brain dead for my liking. And Big the Cat, well, obviously sucks, I can't deny that. Though thankfully, his campaign is the shortest, taking up like 2% of the game at best, so it doesn't completely hinder my experience with the game, but it is still stupid that you have to play through his story to begin with. Now, as much as I've praised most of the gameplay so far, I do have some issues I want to bring up. I did mention I really like the other characters and the way they play, but unfortunately, I do feel like the level design doesn't take advantage of their abilities as much as I'd like them to. Tails is especially an egregious example. Most of his levels are really easy to cheese, to the point where they become complete jokes. Knuckles and Gamma also has levels I feel end too quickly too, usually being a minute long or less. I just wish these characters actually got more levels designed around their gameplay, and that said levels would last a bit longer too. As I've said though, I enjoy the core of their gameplay, so I still can have quite a bit of fun. I just think the level design could have been a bit better is all. Though there are still some highlights I do want to very quickly mention that does have both good length and level design. Those being Tails' Speed Highway, Gamma's Hot Shelter, Knuckles' Red Mountain, and honestly pretty much all of Amy's stages. Another issue I have with the game personally is the pacing, which I think could be a bit iffy. Some of the extra levels and bosses can feel like auto-scrollers and not that interesting to play. Chaos 4 and Sky Chase Act 1 and 2 being the worst examples. Having to fight Chaos 4 3 times, as well as having to play the Sky Chase levels 4 times is ridiculous. Though, at least your second time playing them, you could go for the highest score for the optional emblem, which I tend to do personally, but still, it's a little ridiculous to have to play them that many times to begin with. Don't even get me started on the unskippable cutscenes in the Dreamcast version too. That issue alone is why I much prefer replaying the DX version, even with that port's shortcomings. I also know another problem people tend to have with this game is that it's a bit janky. I suppose it is true, especially with the later DX ports that I heard were really buggy, but I feel at least the Dreamcast and GameCube versions are still janky, but never enough to ruin my experience. But maybe that's just me. I'm also pretty used to old janky 3D platformers. Mario 64 and Sunshine are some of my top favorite games ever made, and those games have janky camera issues too. But even then, I feel like the janky adventure one was never all that intrusive for me to begin with. Once again, I'm probably more forgiving towards 3D platformer jank than the average person, at least as long as there's ways around it and the gameplay at its core is still fun, which thankfully is very much the case with Adventure 1. Gosh, I haven't even mentioned the game's soundtrack, story, and other non-gameplay stuff yet. This game's OST is just so incredibly good. You'll be hearing me say this a lot about most of these games unsurprisingly, but even then, Sonic Adventure might actually have my favorite soundtrack in the entire franchise. I think the mix of that Crush 40 rock we all love, as well as some of the other genres they threw in there, really gave the game a very uplifting, funky, and even badass vibe to it. I also really appreciate the story and lore in this game. I know the cutscenes haven't aged well, but the actual story and stuff going on is really cool. I enjoy how every character, both new and old, got some character development throughout the game. Having more lore on the Master Emerald and the Echidna tribe was really sick too. It really felt like it was expanding upon the Sonic universe, but never trying to retcon or disrespect what came before. It's really great stuff. The new characters they introduced, like Tikal, Chaos, and Gamma, are awesome additions too, and some of my personal favorite Sonic characters, both in character design and their personalities. Gamma's death was also one of the first emotional cutscenes I ever watched as a kid, so Gamma especially is a character I hold a special place in my heart for. His whole story was just really well done. I also love the other characters' stories too, and how even some of them go through some new character development that we've never seen in the Genesis games. Whether it's Tails finding the courage to believe in himself and stop Eggman on his own, Knuckles on learning more on why he protects the Master Emerald, Amy learning to be more independent, or Gamma realizing he doesn't have to be a henchman for Eggman and goes out to free all the other animals captive inside the robots Eggman made, including himself. Once again, I understand the way these cutscenes are presented aren't the best, but I think the stories told for some of these characters are awesome, and were a great way to evolve the series from the classic era. Another detail I absolutely love is how with each campaign, the voice acting and lines are different for each character, showing how each of them perceive one another. My favorite example is Eggman's dialogue and tone in Sonic's campaign is more over the top and silly, showing how Sonic doesn't take Eggman as seriously. Whereas in Tails' campaign, Eggman sounds much more intimidating, showing how Tails perceives Eggman as much more scary and threatening.
If it isn't Sonic! Well, if it isn't Sonic and Tails.
It just makes Tails' ending fight with Eggman all the more satisfying. Seriously so cool. I could go on and on about the story and other stuff, like how each character's theme song represents their personalities, or how incredible and stylish the artwork for the game is, or even the Chao Garden and how it gives you an even bigger incentive to actually explore the stages. But I feel I've already got my main points across, so yeah. I think it's pretty obvious that I love this game to death, despite some of its flaws. It's one of my all-time favorite video games, and it probably always will be. Going back to the tier list I made, Sonic Adventure easily goes in the top tier for me without a doubt. I know some people might be upset with that, but I'm sorry, I just really enjoy this game, man. Sonic Adventure 2 is considered by some to be one of, if not, the very best 3D Sonic game ever made. But there's also a lot of other people that find this game incredibly overrated, especially back in the 2010s when YouTubers were really critical of 3D Sonic games in general. For me though, similar to the first Sonic Adventure, I'm in the camp that absolutely loves this game, but also like Adventure 1, I can admit this game does have its issues. Though I don't personally think they're as glaring as Adventure 1's flaws for the most part. Adventure 2 this time around focuses on only 3 gameplay styles instead of the 6 from before, having 2 characters for each style due to the 2 separate campaigns. Of course, you got your traditional Sonic and Shadow levels, and these are obviously fantastic. They really cranked up the speed and set pieces with these, and just about all of them have really great level design with tons of replayability. They do feel a bit more linear than before, but there's still plenty of shortcuts and secrets to find, so I don't personally mind too much. The classic style momentum from Adventure 1 is still present too, and though the spin dash did get nerfed a bit since you can't spam it as much, it's still very useful and fun to use. There's also all the new gameplay mechanics that they added like the bounce bracelet, somersault, grind rails, and the instant ring dash. Most of these are pretty great additions, though it did come with some drawbacks, mainly the fact that most of these actions are mapped to one button, which can lead to some annoying and janky moments, especially when trying to ring dash. Outside of that though, I don't really have much other issues with these stages besides the occasional jank, but I'm not done talking about them just yet. On top of everything I already said, the game now has a new ranking system based on how good your score is. There's all kinds of ways to get tons of points, like taking certain shortcuts, killing tons of enemies before touching the ground, collecting items in rings, and so on and so forth. This really incentivizes the player to master these stages outside of just speedrunning them, and getting good at all of these skills at once makes you feel really stylish. It helps that these levels were very clearly designed with the ranking system in mind too, so it all feels so natural and satisfying to do. Overall, the traditional speed stages in this game are fantastic as I've already made clear, but I will admit, I do think I enjoy Adventure 1 Sonic levels a tiny bit more. The controls and movement just feel a bit more precise and also loose at the same time, really letting you feel like you could do whatever the hell you want. That isn't to say Adventure 2 controls bad or anything, it still plays great, but Adventure 1 just felt so perfect to me. But there is more to Adventure 2 than just the speed stages. There's also the mech and treasure hunting levels too. These levels have always been a bit of a mixed bag for people, but as for me, I genuinely really love playing them. In fact, I think they're way better than the other characters in Adventure 1, as in everyone besides Sonic of course. The levels now actually feel like they were designed with the characters in mind, giving you more room to use their abilities and actually having decent length to them. Starting with the mech stages, I thought these were a very big improvement compared to the Gamma levels. Not only are they longer and have more actual platforming challenges, but you have a real incentive to lock on to as many enemies as possible now, since it gives you tons of points, which obviously helps you get that A rank. I guess there was technically an incentive in the Gamma levels. There was always a timer ticking down, and the more enemies you locked onto, the more time you'd get to try and finish the stage. The issue with this is that the levels are so short that it felt like it barely mattered to begin with. You could just kinda mash the shoot button and play through all the levels that way just fine. I suppose it is still the case in Adventure 2's mech levels too, but now you'd always end up getting a lower rank if you played like that. And as for me, I love playing this game for those A ranks, so I end up actually trying to time my lock-ons and getting as much points as I possibly can instead. On top of that, I also prefer the platforming too. I know, that's a bit of a hot take, but I actually like the heavier feel of the mechs because it led to faster and more precise platforming. The hover jump also gives you a little more height too, which can help you take tiny shortcuts and save time. I don't know, maybe I'm weird, but I just think the mechs are way more interesting and fun in this game. As for the treasure hunting levels, my feelings on them are a little more complicated. I'd say they were also a big improvement in most areas compared to Adventure 1. For starters, Knuckles and Rouge move way faster now, and all the new moves they get like the downward drill attack and other moves really allow them to schmoove in these big open levels. The ranking system also gives you the most points based on how quickly you get each emerald piece. The hint TVs also play a big part too, since they lower how many points you get depending on how much you read of them. So trying to strike that balance between not reading too many hints, as well as getting the emerald pieces super fast for those A ranks, on top of how fun the movement is, really gives these stages their own sense of style and speedrun ability to them. Now, there are still some iffy stuff about these stages though. The main gripe for me is how much of a downgrade the radar is in this game. In Adventure 1, it could track any of the 3 emerald pieces at any time, and it had a more precise sensitivity to how close you were to them. Now they changed it to where the radar only tracks one at a time, forcing you to collect them in a specific order, unless you accidentally stumble upon a later one. And it isn't as precise with how close you are to an emerald piece either, so you could be running around the same area having it constantly blinking yellow and not knowing exactly which direction to go, which can be pretty annoying. And because of how big these stages are too, the first time playthrough of them can usually take quite a bit of time to beat. Now, if you do put the time into learning the level design and some of the hints, you can pretty easily beat these stages in only a couple minutes or less, even if you do get crappy RNG. So personally for me, I end up still really enjoying these stages and find them quite rewarding to master. I will admit, the idea of these stages are kinda weird, but I really like them a ton despite some of my issues. The level mastery and movement still give that same satisfaction as a traditional Sonic stage would, it's just done in a very different and unique way. In fact, having these more open area style levels gives the game a nice bit of variety and keeps things fresh, since the speed and mech stages have more linear level design. In general, I once again completely understand why people dislike these stages, but as I've stated before, I still find myself really enjoying them a lot, even with their flaws. So yeah, overall, I really enjoy all 3 gameplay styles. Sure, the Sonic and Shadow levels are probably still the best in the game, but I don't feel like the other levels are way worse by any means, which is something I can't say the same for with Adventure 1. On top of all that, I also think Adventure 2 is a much better paced game as well. There's no hub worlds, all the cutscenes are skippable, and the bosses don't take nearly as long to beat. And if they do, they're still more fun and interesting than at least Chaos 4 is. Though the bosses still can be hit or miss admittedly. I really like the King Boom Boo in the first Bio-Lizard fight. But then there's the rival battles, and these are pretty ass. But at least they're super short and easy to cheese, which is about the worst these bosses ever get, so I don't really mind. Heck, the only other gameplay style in the game are these 2 driving stages, and I even find these to be pretty decent. At least trying to drive quickly and make those sharp turns is far more interesting than just waiting around in the Sky Chase levels. Goodness gracious, I probably spent way too much time talking about the gameplay by itself, but I just have so much to say, it was really hard for me to not go into detail about it all. Still though, I really want to talk about some of the other stuff outside of the gameplay too. The music is an easy start, cause again, just like Adventure 1, this game's soundtrack is pretty darn good. It really goes hard on the Crush 40 rock this time around, but it still tackles other genres too. In fact, every character sorta gets their own style and sometimes entirely different genres of music in their stages. Once again, taking that idea of having music representing a character's personality from Adventure 1, but applying it to all their stages now instead of just one theme song. It's kinda crazy. I did say before that Adventure 1's soundtrack is my favorite, and that is still true, but I still respect how ambitious they went with the music in this game, and how it all ties to the characters themselves. Speaking of the characters, the story and characterizations of everyone might be my favorite in the series. Don't get me wrong, the story is definitely not perfect, and both the voice acting and audio mixing can be pretty rough too, but I still found the story really fun and action-packed from start to finish. So many memorable moments, both ironically funny and also really cool too. I mean, I have to bring up the Eggman scene with the fake emerald at least once. That
Maria
was seriously Eggman at his peak.
You thought you could trick me with that fake emerald, didn't you?
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails! Because you just told me, Fox Boy.
In general, every character just feels like themselves to me, which unfortunately is something I can't really say is the case for most of these games going forward. I could go on and on about the story stuff, so before I move on from it, I want to at least mention one more thing. Adventure 2 introduced us to probably my favorite character in the franchise, Shadow the Hedgehog. I just love his whole character arc, backstory, relationship with Maria, and all the crazy lore stuff with the Bio-Lizard, how Shadow was created and inspired by the mural from 3 and Knuckles, Gerald Robotnik losing his mind after Maria's death and giving a very dark speech before he gets shot and killed in a jail cell, and okay. I gotta control myself here. I can't make this whole damn video about Adventure 2. I'm kinda just blurting out a bunch of stuff at this point, which I apologize for, but just know that I really love Shadow and this whole game's story and lore so much. I know I've been talking about Adventure 2 for ages now, but there's still one tiny important part of the game that I left out, that being the Chao Garden. This is pretty much the main reason why everyone seems to love this game, and I totally understand why. There is so much stuff that they added and improved to make this the best Chao Garden we ever got. There's also just so much hidden depth when it comes to raising Chao, especially with breeding and getting the best stats, different color mixes, and Chao types. It is pretty damn complicated, and to be honest, I really never dived super deep into any of that stuff. But even as a casual enjoyer of the Chao Garden, it's still a ton of fun. Like I said for Adventure 1, getting Chao drives, animals, and rings gives you a huge incentive to replay levels and explore them to your heart's content. Having your own cute pet chows and taking care of them is so fun, and having 2 different minigames to play that can unlock more stuff when you win is really cool too. For what was supposed to be an optional side mode, it's seriously impressive how in-depth they made the whole thing, especially when you have it on top of an already great game. Alright, I feel I've made my point by now. I love Sonic Adventure 2. Like Adventure 1, it's one of my all-time favorite video games, and I hope my long tangent on it really helped anyone understand why. Still, I do get why people find this game overrated or not fun to play, but I guess for me, the positives really outweigh the negatives whenever I play it. I always have a really great time. So of course, this means I'll also be putting this game in the top tier on my tier list as well, alongside Adventure 1. As I've stated earlier in the video, the way I order the tiers with these games really doesn't matter too much, and honestly, I love both Adventure 1 and 2 equally. Though if I had to pick which game deserves to be higher up, it's probably Adventure 2. Just because I think it's the more solid package between the 2 games. Adventure 1 still has my favorite Sonic levels and soundtrack though, so it's still very neck and neck for me. Ah man, Sonic Heroes. You want to truly talk about a Sonic game that's gone mixed reception over the years? It's this one. I know I also said this about the adventure games to an extent, but I personally feel this game takes it to a whole nother level. Seriously, I see people either say this is one of the best 3D Sonic games, or that it's one of the buggiest, most awful games they've ever played. As for me, well, I'm gonna sound like a broken record again here, but I genuinely love Sonic Heroes. And just like the adventure games, I would consider it one of my favorite games of all time too. I know, I probably sound like the most biased Sonic fan on the planet right now, but there was a point where this game wasn't in my top favorites. It's a game I've had to warm up to in the past few years, and I am definitely aware that this game is not perfect. But I don't know, man. The more I play this game, the more I love it. Heck, I've managed to A-rank every mission in the game almost twice now in the past couple of years. And trust me, the first time I did this, I had some rage-inducing moments, and it was kind of a pain that first time around. So, if anyone knows and understands this game's flaws and jank, well, it's definitely me. So I totally understand why people don't like this game. But I do like this game. It took some time to, but eventually I fell in love with it and have really appreciated its surprisingly in-depth gameplay. I suppose I am getting a bit ahead of myself though, so I should probably talk about why I love this game so much in the first place. As I said before, this game has quite a lot of depth in its gameplay. It's kinda hard for me to explain it all if I'm being honest, but I'll try the best I possibly can to. And just as a warning, I'll be going into a lot of detail, just because of how much there is to it. I really want to convey my thoughts on why I love it so much, even if it means over-explaining myself a bit, so I do apologize ahead of time. So, as you probably know, Sonic Heroes is a game where you control a team of 3 characters, each having their own transformations that give you different moves and abilities. On top of that, there's also a leveling up system that helps improve each character's moveset too. These are what I consider the central mechanics of the game. It's what the level design and combat are built around, and what makes it so damn fun in my opinion. I probably should talk about these things one at a time though, so I'll try starting with the level design, which I personally think is really good. The levels are massive and can have tons of different pathways and areas to go to. There's your typical more trickier alternate paths, which usually leads to shortcuts that beat the stage quicker, which is the kind of level design you'd want out of a Sonic game obviously. But now on top of that, some of these pathways and secret areas can also reward you with these little orb things. Depending on what the color is, it'll level up one of the characters. Now, these leveled up moves mostly just help with the combat, which I'll dive more into in a bit, but just trust me when I say that leveling up your characters are very important, so there is a real incentive on getting these. Another great element about the level design is how unique every level is. Not only do they look visually gorgeous, but they also have unique gimmicks and platforming challenges that makes each one stand out. For example, there's a level called Frog Forest, where when these frogs see you, they summon rain from the sky, growing plants and vines that can be used for platforming. Then there's also Hang Castle, which is a haunted themed level where you're flipping gravity and going upside down, making for some really trippy level design. There's Egg Fleet where you're traveling between giant battleships, Bingo Highway where you're on a pinball table, trying to hit these numbered coins that give you a bingo if you clear a line on them on the board, and so on and so forth. Like I said, the theming and set pieces in these stages are just absolutely incredible. Though, some of these gimmicks can be a bit frustrating to deal with on your first playthrough, mainly with the pinball and grind rail physics. These can feel a little janky and inconsistent at times, but I suppose I've played this game so much now, I barely have much trouble with these mechanics myself. A lot of that is probably because I've learned my ways around this game's jank, which will unfortunately be somewhat of a common thing you have to deal with in this game. Before moving on to the combat, I should probably talk about the controls and platforming mechanics, since what's the point of good level design if the gameplay isn't fun, right? This is where people can feel a bit mixed. Heroes' controls are very weird and unusual compared to most platformers, or just Sonic games period. As for me, I really dig how this game feels to play, even if it is a bit wonky and hard to get used to. The thing that personally makes me love it so much is the fluidity of switching between all 3 of the character formations, and how they can be used for multiple situations. Going off of each character type's name, it's pretty obvious which one is useful for what. Speed types are best for going fast, flying types for platforming, and power types for destroying objects. My personal favorite way to play is using the speed character anytime I can, and if I find a risky platforming area or have objects and enemies in my way, I just swap to the other character formations. The fun part about this is that you can swap between forms super quickly, making it so the flow of the game is never put to a halt. You can even do cool little speedrun tricks with swapping characters too, like if you're going super fast and you switch to the power character and immediately glide as soon as you can carry your momentum of speed you had before and glide past stuff super fast. Heck, even something as simple as the positioning for each formation is important too. As an example, using the power form spreads out the 3 characters, which can help get rings and items that are more spread out. And once again, there's multiple paths as I stated before, but these have to be reached with specific forms, and really, it's up to you to decide which path you want to go to depending on what you're comfortable with, or if you want to take the fastest shortcut, or want to level up a specific character faster. There's always a strategy and reason to use every formation at any given moment. I love how much freedom you have with figuring it out yourself. It just gives this game an insane amount of replay value, and is a big part of why I enjoy this game more and more each time I play it. And dude, I haven't even mentioned the combat yet, which is designed in a pretty similar way, being more strategic but also free-flowing and fast-paced too if you know what you're doing. Once again, like the platforming, each character formation is useful for different things, especially when taking the leveling up system into account. Starting with the speed characters, one of the main moves that they have is the homing attack, which could be used for flying enemies and ones with rock shields early on, but they also have a tornado move too, which can flip over certain enemies or get rid of their shields entirely. As for the flying characters, they can reach the most distance with their attacks and can stun enemies too, but their attacks are a bit weak and don't do a lot of damage, or just not at all to certain enemies. Then lastly is the power characters, which these guys are obviously the strongest, going through most shields and tanky enemies that the other 2 character types can't. Using a combination of all the characters with their different moves for combat generally gives a good bit of strategy, and figuring out what the fastest strategies are for every enemy is super fun to me. I know to some, this combat system may sound like it'd make the game too slow or boring, but that's where the leveling up system comes in. Finally, I'm now actually talking about this damn mechanic. So the way this works is that every time a character levels up, their moves become a bit stronger, and sometimes gets new effects too. Knowing how much stronger each attack gets, you can switch up strategies you were using before and use new ones to defeat enemies even quicker now, especially once a character reaches level 3, which is the max level. For example, when a speed character is fully leveled up, their homing attack gets the same effect that the tornado does, making it so now the homing attack can blow off any shield in the game. The benefit to this is now you don't have to deal with the end lag of the tornado move, making it so you can continue attacking immediately after. This leveled up attack is even faster than using a low level power character to destroy shields, so now you can switch up your strategy and use the speed character more instead. Heck, since you have to use the tornado move to swing on these poles, having the homing attack now makes it where you can grab onto them instantly, making even the platforming itself faster than before. The other 2 types become really useful too at max level. Level 3 flying type attacks specifically are pretty well known for being the most easy and brain-dead ways to kill enemies, since it's pretty much a projectile that kills most enemies instantly. I personally don't think it's so overpowered that it makes all the other options useless, as some people like to say though. It is very strong, don't get me wrong, but there's still benefits to using the other 2 types too, especially if you want to keep the flow going. For example, the flying attack usually stops you in place, so if you want to be faster, it might be better to use a level 3 homing attack for rows of flying enemies, so that you're still killing them but also moving forward at the same time. There's also the giant explosion attack the power characters have when they're at level 3, which can be used to cover a huge area, and while this is happening, you're free to move and do other moves at the same time. So now that you understand why the leveling up system is so important, it makes sense why exploring the stages for orbs is something you really feel incentivized to do. Of course, you can absolutely get to the max level for all 3 characters if you're good enough and don't die, which will make you a force to be reckoned with. It's just so fun obliterating everything in your path once you become super overpowered. The game even has these super attack moves, which you can get by filling up its gauge by defeating enemies or collecting rings or certain items. These pretty much wipe out every enemy around you, making them very useful and once again gives you a big incentive to explore more of these stages. Okay, I know I just explained a ton of things all at once, but at the same time, when I said this game is very in-depth in its gameplay, I do mean very in-depth. Really, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this was one of the hardest parts in the script to write for me, as well as doing voiceovers for, so I apologize if it turned out poorly. I at least hope y'all understand why I love this game so much though. It's just the platforming, the level design, and the combat all just comes together to make one of the most complex and fun Sonic games ever made to me. Especially taking the ranking system into account too, which I didn't even talk about, but at this point, I think I've explained enough as it is. Thankfully, I don't really have much to comment on when it comes to the story this time around. I suppose it's cool that Metal Sonic is the main villain, and I do like some of the dialogue and banter all the characters have too. But besides that, I don't really have anything else to say about it unlike the adventure games. The story definitely took a back seat this time around, which is totally fine by me, considering how long the heroes portion of this video has gone on for. The thing is though, I'm still not completely done talking about this game. I know, I'm sorry. There's just a few things I still want to talk about that I think are too important to gloss over. Mainly some of the game's flaws I haven't yet mentioned, or at least problems most people tend to have with this game. I did say Heroes wasn't perfect after all, and I do mean that. The first main flaw most people tend to talk about is the game's jank and wonky controls. The speed characters can feel a bit slippery, the power characters when punching are really tough to control and can sometimes fall off the level if you aren't used to them, and other stuff like the previously mentioned janky physics with the grind rails and the pinball stages. Now for me, I've gotten used to a lot of these things or just never had issues with them to begin with. But I am aware that this game could definitely control a bit better and be more consistent, and I wish it did for sure. But I guess for me, the controls just don't get in my way enough to ruin my experience, especially considering how much I love everything else about the game. There's still a few flaws though, like the boss fights and the special stages, which I do feel these are pretty shooty, I'm not gonna lie. Now once again, I know the cheese strats for all of them, so I end up not struggling with these much myself, but they are still undeniably the weakest parts of the game in my opinion. Heroes also has multiple campaigns with some very slight level design changes. You do have to beat all of them and get the Chaos Emeralds in order to get the true ending. This is definitely a lazy way to pad out the game, but I guess the way I view it is that I look at it like the campaigns as their own playthroughs, similar to something like Sonic 3 and Knuckles and its multiple playable characters. I can usually feel content beating one story and doing the others at a different time if I feel like it. Sure, it's still kinda crappy, I can't deny that, but as I've said, I'm usually content with playing one campaign and leaving it at that. The only thing you end up missing out if you do this is just the true final boss fight, so it's not like you're missing out on a ton of content or anything. The only other flaw I can really think of at this point is that a couple of the Team Chaotic stages can be pretty ass to play. There's a couple where it wants you to find a boatload of specific items, or wants you to kill every enemy in a stage, which can be a major pain in the ass, but I only found a select few of them to really bother me that much. Now, if Heroes were full of these garbage tier Chaotix levels, that would be a different story. But thankfully, that isn't really the case for me. But man, imagine if Sega did make a 3D Sonic game full of these horrible Chaotix style levels. Man, that would just suck, wouldn't it? We'll be getting to that game in just a minute. Alright. That is enough Sonic Heroes talk. At this point, I would not be surprised if this ends up being the longest part of my video. Guess what? It isn't my longest part of the video. Great. I'm really sorry guys, it's just Sonic Heroes is a game I know a lot of people hate, so I wanted to make sure y'all really understood why I love this game so much, but also acknowledge its faults at the same time. Honestly, even as someone that's tired of the remake culture the gaming industry has been pushing towards for a while now, I do think a Heroes remake would be pretty cool. Especially if it helped people realize how truly great this game is when you don't have to deal with its annoying flaws. But for me, as I've made very clear, I love the original game for what it is, flaws and all. So, finally going back to my tier list, it should be pretty obvious that I'm putting Heroes in top tier, alongside the adventure games. Where I'd order it doesn't really matter, but if I had to place it somewhere specific, I'd probably place it behind Adventure 1. Once again, all these games are pretty much tied for me, but I'm going to give the adventure games the edge, just because they've had more of a personal impact on me past just the gameplay, especially with the music and stories in those games. I guess now you're probably thinking to yourself, bro, does this guy hate any 3D Sonic game? It's been nothing but praise so far, where's the negativity at? For anyone feeling this way, you're just in luck, because the next few games I'll be talking about are ones I can't say I'm particularly fond of. Oh boy, Shadow the Hedgehog. This is a game I've had a rocky history with. As a kid, I thought this game was the coolest shit ever. I mean, it was Shadow's very own game where you get to shoot guns and be a badass. Like, how sick is that, right? Then I replayed it back in my late teen years and absolutely hated it, to the point where it was almost my least favorite 3D Sonic game at the time. As for how I feel about it nowadays, well, I'm still not a fan. I wouldn't say I absolutely hate the game, but I still can't say I particularly like it either. It sucks, cause I've actually seen this game get some fans in recent years, and I'm glad people are able to enjoy it, but unfortunately for me, I just don't click with it. That doesn't mean I don't have positive things to say about the game though. In fact, I'd actually like to begin with said positives. I guess an easy one to start with is the game's soundtrack, and gosh damn does it kick so much ass. I used to not think much of it for a long time, but recently listening to it again, I think it goes pretty hard. Since the game is trying to be a bit more edgy than your average Sonic game, they made the OST lean more into hard rock and metal. I think it sounds awesome. I'd go into more detail, but personally, I'm really not the best at describing music stuff, so just know this game's soundtrack has some really catchy tunes that you should give a listen to if you haven't already. Another part of this game I used to not really care much for is the level themes and environments, but I think they've grown on me a little bit. The level themes are more gritty and edgy, giving for some really unique environments. My personal favorite ones are the cyberspace stages, Circus Park, and Cryptic Castle. Though some levels can come off as a bit drab and lacking much in color at times too, but I don't think it's too egregious or anything. The last majorly positive thing I have to say about the game is that it's surprisingly not that janky, or at least fixed some janky issues from previous 3D Sonic games. The ring dash not only works a bit more consistently now, but the button map before it is a lot better too. At least there isn't anything you could do in the air with said button besides the ring dash, so you won't accidentally do a different move if you do mistime it, which is a very nice quality of life improvement. Switching between grind rails is also a lot more consistent too. I can't think of a single time that it ever screwed me over in this game. They even still allow you to go really fast on them too, especially if you use a spin dash into one, which feels pretty great. Though unfortunately, this is sorta where most of the pauses for this game end for me, especially with some of the other gameplay changes they made to the game. In terms of Shadow's other movement options, I feel they were made a lot weaker here than in previous 3D Sonic games. The spin dash, for example, doesn't feel nearly as fun or fluid as before, since now you have to completely stop yourself to charge up one. What makes this worse is that the spin dash only gives you a ton of speed for a few seconds, making it only useful for crossing big gaps. No longer can it be used to whirl down certain terrain to make you go faster like in previous games. I even like the rocket excel in Sonic Heroes more, even with how inconsistent it was at times, because at least I don't have to completely halt my momentum to use it. What sucks now is that the fastest method of movement in this game is just running, making it so most of the time, you're just kinda holding forward and not doing much else for interesting movement, which I personally find to be pretty boring. It doesn't help that they made the homing attack and the triangle jump, a movement option in Heroes that I forgot to mention, feel a lot slower too. On top of that, this game's combat system is a pretty big downgrade from Heroes, being way more simplistic since you're either slowly jumping on enemies or shooting guns to defeat them. Now normally, a simplistic combat system like this is totally fine for a Sonic game. The adventure games most certainly don't have complex combat systems either, but the big difference between why it works in those games compared to Shadow the Hedgehog is because the game's enemies, levels, and missions are designed around the simplistic combat system, making it so those games still have a nice flow and fluidity to them. The same can't really be said about Shadow the Hedgehog though. The enemies still have these big health bars like Heroes, but now the lack of depth in the combat makes defeating them kinda boring and more tedious. And the worst part about all of this? Every level in this game has multiple missions, and a lot of these said missions work exactly like the Team Chaotix levels did, usually having to collect a bunch of stuff, or kill tons of enemies, or sometimes needing to kill every single enemy in an entire stage. The Chaotix only had like 1 or 2 levels at most where you had to kill every enemy, and those were my least favorite levels in Heroes. Once again, at least in that game, I enjoy the combat and level design, so it wasn't all that bad. But now that the combat is simplistic in this game, it makes doing these missions a complete chore to do, especially if you miss one enemy or item, making it so you have to go back and replay the whole stage again, just to find that one last enemy or item you missed. It's just not very fun to me. The level design can also be very hit or miss too. Some levels can have some really cool ideas like Lava Shelter, where both missions have really fun platforming and speedrun ability to them, but then there's a lot of other levels that I just find kinda bland and too straightforward, especially with how boring I find the core gameplay to be. But then you have some really awful stages, like Cosmic Fall, where you're just very slowly waiting for debris to show up so you can platform on them to progress. Or there's this auto-scroller stage where you're literally just riding on this flying alien thing like it's Sky Chase all over again. Or Central City where you're running around this giant maze with no map by the way, trying to find and blow up certain bombs depending on which mission you choose. This is even the worst of it, because they really double down on the auto-scroller and maze-like level design with the 2 Maria stages. Holy
Damn.
These levels are absolutely garbage. I'd go as far and say they're some of the worst levels ever put in a Sonic game. They are just completely miserable experiences. No matter how many times I've played these, and no matter what mission I choose, it is never, ever fun to play through. I probably should mention that this game does have a multiple route progression system. Depending on which mission you choose, you can go to a different stage and eventually end up with a different ending. I guess in this way, you can choose and pick which levels and missions you want to play to make the experience less miserable, but that shouldn't even be a problem to begin with. Plus, at least for me, I'm bound to play a level or two I dislike anyways, no matter how hard I try to avoid them, especially because the game wants you to get all 10 endings in order to get the true final boss, which I think is an even bigger issue than the 4 playthroughs you had to do in Heroes. It's pretty bad. Not even the ranking system can save any of these levels. It generally sucks in this game. There's no cool in-depth ways to interact with the level design to get more points. All you really have to do to get an A rank is just to beat whatever mission you're doing as fast as possible. Heck, you can even die a couple of times, losing all the points you accumulated before, and still get an A rank as long as you were fast enough. It's a complete joke. I haven't even mentioned the story in this game yet, which I personally thought was pretty bad too. It especially makes so little sense due to you being able to change whether or not you're on the good or bad side at any point, especially when it makes the least sense to switch sides. The cutscenes are also just hilariously bad in general, which I suppose isn't a horrible flaw, because at least they're really funny.
Chaos Emerald? You've got to be kidding me, guys. This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me. Where's that damn 4th Chaos Emerald? I am Shadow the Hedgehog, a research experiment gone deadly wrong. I've caused so much destruction. I should never have been created. This is who I am.
Hey, don't go there! Yet!
I will be stronger than him. This is who I am.
What?
Goodbye, Doctor.
But as someone that loves Shadow's character so much, it's still rather disappointing that we didn't get a genuinely good story. I'm not going to go further into the story stuff since it's not really my number one problem with the game, but it's still something I wanted to mention. At this point, the only other thing I have to say left is that there is an extra mode you can unlock. If you do, it pretty much lets you play every level of the game in a specific order, without any of the annoying missions. I'll admit, I could get some enjoyment out of this mode, but unfortunately, you have to 100% the entire game to unlock it, which is just ridiculous. Even then though, at the end of the day, I'm still not super into the gameplay and level design anyways, so I'm not in love with this mode or anything, but it is the best way to play through the game, as long as you can get 100% save file online to play it, because you know that's how I did it. Man, it sucks. I really wanted to like this game, I really did, but I just don't. Once again, I know this game has its fans nowadays, and if you like it yourself, don't let my opinion upset or sway you. I'm just saying my personal thoughts on it, even if I am very passionate about how I feel with the game. Everyone has different tastes at the end of the day, right? I wouldn't even necessarily call Shadow the Hedgehog a horrible game either. I guess for me, I just find it to be very mediocre and boring more than anything else. It's not the worst Sonic game I ever played, but it is one of my least favorites in terms of 3D Sonic, so I gotta put it in the low tier. Though you guys probably knew I was gonna place it there anyways, but I obviously gotta mention it. Well, here it is, the most infamous Sonic game of all time, Sonic 06. In fact, this is probably one of the most hated video games in general, but you probably already knew that. Though the question is, do I think the hate for it is justified? Yeah, I think it is, at least for the most part. It makes me sad though, really. I used to love this game as a kid. It felt like the closest we ever got to a sequel to the adventure games. The hub worlds, upgrades, multiple character campaigns, and a pretty ambitious story to boot. This really felt like a new adventure game on HD consoles, and as a kid, I absolutely loved it. Of course, now that I look back on it as an adult, I can clearly see this game was an unfinished mess now. That doesn't mean there isn't anything I still like about the game though. But for every one thing I do enjoy in this game, there's like 5 other major things that I heavily dislike about it, or at least think was executed extremely poorly. I guess to give an example of what I mean, let's take a look at Sonic's campaign. My main positive takeaway when I play through it is that I think the level design is generally really good. And no, I'm not even joking when I say that. The levels feel massive in scope, with tons of alternate paths and shortcuts, more similar to level design you'd see in something like Heroes, or the adventure games. It's really good stuff. but then you look at the actual core gameplay of Sonic and the crew, and all that kind of gets thrown out the window. I mean, I could already start off by saying that Sonic himself isn't very fast in this game. Sonic's top running speed is extremely slow compared to previous games, and the terrain you run on doesn't even affect your speed or momentum at all, because there is no momentum to begin with. Sonic no longer has any weight to his movement or gameplay, something I feel is extremely important for a Sonic game to have. This also applies to every other character in the game too, and most of them are slower than Sonic himself, making them even more sluggish and stiff to play. Sonic's moveset in general also doesn't feel as fluid or fun as before. The homing attack now has more end lag, making homing attack chains feel more slow and less satisfying. The bounce bracelet makes a return too, but it also doesn't feel as good to use outside of combat. When you use it, you basically lose all your speed and have no aerial drift unlike before. And then there's the spin dash. Oh my lordy, what have they done to you? Not only do you have to charge it by standing still again like in Shadow the Hedgehog, but now you can't even jump out of it anymore to cross large gaps. On top of that, you can't even use it going downhill to go faster either, because once again, this game has no momentum or weight in its movement. Look, I may not be the biggest fan of the spin dash in Shadow the Hedgehog, but at least it was still useful. Same cannot be said for 06 at all. Really, the only other way of going faster with Sonic is using the blue gem shoes, which gives Sonic a sort of boost you can use at will. But even this has issues because you could barely control yourself, and every time you touch literally anything, you have to watch this long ass animation of Sonic falling over and getting up. I guess you can jump out of the boost unlike the spin dash, which is nice, but you still end up losing all your momentum anyways, so it still feels significantly worse than jumping out of a spin dash in previous games. Speaking of the gem shoes, these are super cool ideas in concept. It gives Sonic so many more moves and makes him feel so versatile, but in execution, most of these suck or are flat out broken. They even forgot to program the meter in the bottom right to deplete when you use the gem powers, so you can pretty much use something like the double jump power up infinitely and skip everything. It is completely and utterly broken. Admittedly, some of this stuff is ironically funny to use, and I also like a lot of these gameplay ideas in concept. But once again, it doesn't matter if it's executed poorly. I'd even mention all the glitches in the game, but you're probably aware of how buggy 06 is anyways. And for me, it's not just simply the fact that the game is broken, but that the characters themselves don't feel particularly great to use. It also gets worse with the other characters too, especially with Silver's campaign. Silver is so slow, and his combat abilities, once again cool in concept, are just not done well or all that fun in execution. I could go on and on about how weird and stiff everyone feels to play in this game, but I'd be here for an eternity. And I don't even think that's the worst part of the game. There's still more stuff that I don't like. Like for instance, I think the hub worlds suck in this game and are a significant downgrade from Adventure 1's. They're way too big and empty and lack the same charm that Adventure 1's had. The missions and side quests also suck ass too. Almost all of them require doing something incredibly mundane or frustrating. The bosses also are really bad too. They're so long and take an eternity to beat, even more so than the bosses from previous games, which is kinda saying a lot considering I didn't think the bosses were that great in those games either. And want to know the worst part about all of this? Because I was playing this game on an emulator, the load times were pretty much instant, which for the original version of this game, that was absolutely not the case, as you all probably already know. If you don't, well, the load times were incredibly long, like up to about a minute long each. And sometimes the game would load something incredibly basic like a few bits of dialogue before a mission starts, and then go into another loading screen immediately after. It is a serious pace breaker and wastes so much time. So imagine if I did have to deal with that again. It would have made my experience playing it even worse than it already was. Don't even get me started on the story, which I have very mixed feelings on. On one hand, you got Shadow being unironically the most badass he's ever been, especially with the iconic scene where he takes off the inhibitor rings.
Why fight at all? Why risk your life for those who will persecute you later?
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
But on the other hand, you've got Sonic's story where he instantly falls in love with some human princess lady that he barely knows to begin with. Combined with the human designs looking really out of place with the Sonic characters, these cutscenes end up being extremely awkward and also not very fitting for Sonic's character at all to me. There's so much going on in the story that makes no sense too, like the whole being able to time travel at will thing, which they only end up using or going back in time in convenient moments to progress the story. It's just not well done at all. Not to say Sonic stories in the past were perfect, but I'd still say the adventure games have infinitely better stories than this. Once again, I could go on and on about the story, but just know that like the gameplay, for every one thing I like about the story, there's several other things that I don't like about it at all. Well, I can at least say this game's soundtrack is pretty good. It's not in my top favorites in the series personally, but there are some really good music like usual with Sonic games. Sonic 06 makes me sad, man. I still genuinely love certain aspects of this game, and like a lot of stuff they tried doing in concept, but like, it doesn't matter if it's poorly executed, you know? Look, as I've said before, I do think the adventure games and Heroes have their problems, but I at least still love them at their core, so I'm still willing to defend them. The same just cannot be said about 06 though. 06 at its core is just not that fun to play, and at best, is only ironically fun with glimmers of good stuff with the level design and some Sonic and Shadow stages. And even then, I feel less inclined to play this game than ever, even for guilty pleasure's sake, cause well, a fan remake of this game already exists called Project 06. It's pretty much what I always wanted 06 to be. It fixes everything. It has physics that feel amazing and are more in line with the adventure games, and all the moves every character has feels finished and fun to use. And really, that change alone made me instantly love this game. If the original 06 was even 70% as good as Project 06 is, I'd easily consider it one of my favorite Sonic games by a long shot. I genuinely put it alongside the adventure games and Heroes. But unfortunately though, this video is about official 3D Sonic games, not fan games, so I guess now that we're back on my tier list, I might as well put 06 where it belongs and move on. Once again, I wish I could love this game more. I even have nostalgia for it, and I do know people still enjoy this game despite all of its faults. And like Shadow the Hedgehog, I'm glad people can enjoy it, but unfortunately, I can't have as much fun with it as I'd like to. Alright, I'm gonna be real with you guys. Out of every game I'm talking about in this video today, this was the game I was least looking forward to replaying. For the longest time, Secret Rings was my absolute least favorite 3D Sonic game. Even back when I was a kid, I didn't like it, which was a very rare thing for me to dislike any 3D Sonic game at the time. I just couldn't stand the motion controls and how unresponsive the whole game was. Though, the last time I did play it, I ended up not hating it as much. I even finished the game for the first time on that last playthrough too. Still though, I was pretty worried returning to this game and having a miserable time with it. But, surprisingly, I kinda enjoyed myself this time around. Okay, look, I'm not saying I love the game or anything, but I would be lying if I said I didn't have at least some fun playing it. I think. If anything, I have more of a love-hate relationship with the game nowadays, which hey, that's still a lot better than how I felt about it before. I mean, looking past the obvious control issues for a minute, I don't really have all that much to complain about. The soundtrack is pretty solid, the story is decent, and the level environments are pretty top-notch. Since the game takes place in an Arabian setting, there's tons of really cool and unique level themes and set pieces that's never been done in a Sonic game before, at least at the time. Whether you're in a jungle avoiding dinosaurs, or defeating big robots in a medieval-style factory, or jumping between pirate ships during a huge storm, there's just a lot of cool visual flair to every single one of these stages. And something new I ended up appreciating more this time around is actually the level design. I never thought much of it, but actually playing through the stages again, I was really shocked by how solid and in-depth the stages were. I mean, sure, the levels are pretty linear, but there's still plenty of interesting platforming, occasional shortcuts, and even secret collectibles if you're good enough to collect them. The levels are just solidly fast-paced from start to finish, and the main mission for each area can be pretty lengthy too, around 3 to 5 or even 7 minutes long sometimes. So far, Secret Rings seems like a really good game, right? Well, as I've already stated before, this game has some really weird motion controls, and unfortunately, I can't say I'm still a big fan of them. It's weird, because some of my issues don't fully have to do with the motion control aspect of it either. It's a bit complicated or hard to explain. I suppose I can start with the motion controls anyways though, since we're already talking about it to begin with. The motion controls could definitely feel a bit inconsistent, or not always accurate to what you're wanting it to do. It's not as bad as I remembered, but there were still those once in a while moments where I'd want to turn hard left or right, but the game just wouldn't let me. Or I tried doing a homing attack, and nothing came out cause I guess I didn't shake the Wii remote hard enough. Maybe it's me not being fond of early Wii era motion controls, but I just don't really like the control scheme for this game. Though honestly, there's other issues I have with the controls that I think ended up being a bigger deal to me. Really? It comes down to the fact that something as simple as jumping or standing still is a complete chore to do in this game. Yes, you heard me right. What I'd argue is two of the most simplistic mechanics you can possibly think of for a platformer is hard to properly do in this game. You're probably thinking to yourself, how the f do you mess up jumping and standing still in a video game? Well, allow me to explain. So, there's two different kinds of jumps in this game. One is a quick short hop that keeps your speed going, and the other one is a full hop that lets you jump over large gaps, being the jump you'll use most often for platforming. Seems pretty normal, right? Well, in order to do a full hop, you have to first hold the jump button down for a second, which will have Sonic sliding and charging the jump, and once it's fully charged, then you can release the button and jump. There's quite a bit of issues that came with adding this really dumb extra step. I mean, the obvious one is that you have to wait a second before you can jump in the first place. This is a big problem for both fast-paced and more careful and precise platforming. Trying to react to what's on screen and then jumping can be so hard to do because you have to waste so much time charging the jump while sliding, sometimes running into enemies or obstacles. And then when you're trying to do precise platforming, since you do a slide while charging the jump if you're moving, you'll end up falling off pretty easily before you can actually get your jump out. The easy solution to this would be to stand still, and then charge a jump if you aren't sliding off platforms, right? Well, the problem is that the only way to completely stop yourself is using the brake button. This means you must press the brake button, stop, release the brake, and then start charging a jump. I know, a very tedious way to stand still and jump, but it gets worse, cause I swear on my life, sometimes I'll release the brake button and switch to charging a jump, and Sonic will still move forward first and slide anyways, which has led me to tons of deaths. On top of that, Sonic has a new backflip move that helps him move backwards faster, which only works if you're tilting the Wii remote backwards. But it can also get in the way if you're trying to charge a jump and stand still, since the button you press to backflip is the same one you press for jumping. Because of this, if you end up holding backwards, you'll do the backflip instead. But you also don't want to hold forward too much either, or else Sonic will start sliding again. It feels impossible to know how I'm supposed to hold the Wii remote to make it work exactly the way I want it to. It's so unbelievably frustrating. Don't even get me started on the grind rail mechanics too. Easily the worst in the franchise in my opinion. Switching between grind rails only works like half the time at best, if not less often than even that. And guess what? You can only jump off grind rails by holding a jump button for a second. Not even tapping the button has you jump out of the grind rails, which is arguably even worse than how jumping already works normally. I know people have their issues with the grind rails in previous 3D Sonic games, but I'll take those any day over Secret Rings' grind rails. Like holy shit, it's bad here. Because of how annoying it is to deal with all these things together while playing, half the battle and difficulty ends up being you fighting the damn controls, more than it is the actual gameplay and level design being challenging and fun. I guess the game at least has a leveling up system that helps make the controls a bit more fluid, but not only is that a really stupid thing to lock behind grinding, but it still doesn't fully fix some of the issues I stated before. It's frustrating, man. I still really dig this game's level design and some of the other gameplay mechanics too, but the controls are just so wonky and annoying to deal with. It's weird though, because despite everything I just said, I'd still say I can barely tolerate the controls enough to still get some enjoyment out of the game anyways. But at the same time, I'd also say I could barely not tolerate the controls enough to where I'd want to go out of my way to master every level in the game. Because of this, Secret Rings ends up being a game I have a love-hate relationship with. I'm really having a hard time deciding whether or not I want to put it in middle or low tier for me. So, I'm going to give the game its own tier in between those two tiers. I know this is technically cheating, but I really can't decide where I want to place it, so this is how I feel most comfortable ranking it for the time being. Overall, Secret Rings has warmed up to me a bit, but not enough to consider it a genuinely good and solid game. Sonic UnWiished. out of every game we'll be talking about in this video, this is the one that had the biggest shift in opinion over the years, arguably more so than when the adventure games got tons of hate back in the 2010s. What was once one of the most hated 3D Sonic games has now become a fan favorite amongst a lot of the Sonic fanbase, especially in the past few years. Not to say everyone loves it, UnWiished still has plenty of haters, but it's definitely a game you'll see Sonic fans defend nowadays. As for how I feel about the game, well, it's weird. Growing up, I owned the PS2 version of UnWiished, which is vastly different to the HD version that everyone talks about instead, to the point where it's pretty much its own game. Because of that, I will talk about the PS2 and Wii version in its own section later. So yeah, I actually never played or owned the HD version as a kid. It was the only 3D Sonic game I never played that came out during my childhood. I only got to play it for the first time a few years ago back on my PS3. So if there's any 3D Sonic game I have no nostalgic bias towards, it's definitely this one. Even with my lack of nostalgia or past experience with UnWiished, do I still like it as much as other Sonic fans do? Honestly, yeah, I do for the most part. I really like this game quite a bit. But I also completely understand why others don't like it either. Similar to the adventure games and Heroes, the game definitely has its fair share of problems I'll go into. For now though, I want to talk mostly positive stuff first, because there are a lot of things that I really love about this game. To start, I want to first talk about what I feel is UnWiished's biggest strength to me, and that is its overall presentation. I mean, look at this game, it's visually gorgeous. Whether it's the animations, the textures, the shading, the large in scope and varied level environments, the game's art style being both cartoony and colorful, but also having some realism and little details too, absolutely amazing CGI cutscenes, especially the intro, holy shit at its peak. The list goes on and on. For a game made in 2008, it was way ahead of its time. I still argue it's the best looking 3D Sonic game to this day even, though admittedly, that is both a compliment to UnWiished, but also sort of a diss on future 3D Sonic games visuals, since UnWiished was really the last major art style shift we ever got for the franchise. Another part of this game visually that I really appreciate is how every level in this game is based off real world areas, not only really respecting each of the cultures super well, but also when put together, it really makes UnWiished feel so grand in scope. Like you really are going on a huge adventure exploring the whole world. I absolutely love it. Now, there's more to a game's presentation than just looks. The game also has to sound good, and thankfully, it absolutely nails this too. I suppose the sound design is solid, but for me, it's really the soundtrack that hits so hard. Both the day and nighttime levels have their own style of music to differentiate one and the other. The daytime music is much more upbeat and fun, focused primarily on rock, but also plenty of other genres too that once again, really respect the culture that each one of these levels are based from. And the nighttime music is honestly just as incredible. It's more laid back and chill, having a more jazzy vibe to them. Really, the only problem I have with this game's soundtrack is how often you have to listen to the game's battle theme. It can get pretty annoying, but otherwise, this game's soundtrack is absolutely goated. It's easily one of my favorite OSTs in the entire franchise. Probably even my second favorite, right behind the first Sonic Adventures for me. It's seriously that good. And then there's the game's story, which I also think is pretty strong. Chip is the main new character introduced in this game, and I like him quite a bit. He's pretty lighthearted, but I never thought he got too obnoxious, and I do really like his relationship with Sonic. Though I do wish some of the other characters were more involved. That's partially why I still kinda like the adventure game stories the best. Those games always had so much going on with the plot, characters, and lore, whereas UnWiished doesn't go as deep into some of that stuff, and the story even takes a back seat midway through the game till the very end. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially because UnWiished still has something over previous 3D Sonic games, and that is once again its presentation. Voice acting and animations are significantly better than what came before. Just the overall presentation of the story has aged so much better in general. Once again, the adventure games still have my favorite stories in the series regardless, but I don't think UnWiished is too far off or anything. It's still pretty great stuff. Okay, I've been holding off on talking about the gameplay for long enough, so let's actually get into it now. Similar to the adventure games, UnWiished has more than one playstyle. This time around, you only have one other gameplay style to work with outside of the main Sonic stuff, making it only 2 gameplay styles in total. I'll start with the daytime levels first and save the elephant in the room for last. This probably shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone, but I absolutely love the daytime stages. They're exactly the kind of Sonic levels you'd want to play. They're incredibly fast paced, tons of pathways and shortcuts, really fun set pieces and visual to look at the whole way through. as per usual with these games. Though the actual core gameplay this time around is quite a bit different than previous games. This was the first 3D Sonic game to incorporate the boost style gameplay that's pretty much become the staple for most 3D titles since. The boost is, well, pretty much this huge burst of speed that not only destroys enemies in your path, but also lets you go insanely fast. Easily faster than Sonic has ever ran in any of the other games thus far. It makes these levels feel incredibly exhilarating to play through, making the presentation of the set pieces and environments all the more incredible. However, as much as I love this gameplay style, I do feel it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's awesome how fast you can go through these stages. Really, there's no other big budget platformer game or series out there that can give you the same kind of experience. But on the other hand, it also lets Sega into some issues when designing length for these stages. It was already bad enough with older games with how fast you went in them, making it hard for Sega to extend the length of those games. But now they kinda made it even harder on themselves, because you can go even faster through these levels than you ever could before by quite a bit. Because of this, they had to make levels gargantuan, far bigger than what we had before. But because Sonic is so damn fast in this game, these levels end up being only around 3 to 5 minutes long anyways. On top of that, because you go so fast, you don't really have a ton of control of yourself when boosting, so there ends up not being as much platforming stuff as previous games, though they try to make up for it for having 2D sections in between the 3D ones, making them more platforming focused, which is cool, but once again, I do kinda miss the more 3D focused platforming of the previous games. It just makes me wonder if Sega had stuck with the fully 3D Sonic formula, if they'd ever be able to make longer games out of them, now that they were capable of making these much larger levels in the first place. I don't know. It's something I feel mixed on, unfortunately, but that does not stop me from loving the daytime stages regardless, because they really are awesome. I just sorta miss the fully 3D Sonic stuff, and would have loved to see them further improve the gameplay and length of the games. Alright. You've waited long enough now. I think it's finally time we talk about the nighttime levels. These are easily the most controversial part of the whole game, and are kinda the make it or break it for most people that have played UnWiished. For how I feel about them myself, well, I quite enjoy these stages personally, which I know some people will be upset hearing that, but I do absolutely have my issues with these stages too. Trust me, I completely understand why a lot of people don't like them at all. In fact, I used to not like them myself either when I first played this game. I'll try my best to explain why I like them, and later go into detail why I didn't at first, or issues I still have with them even now. I actually want to start with the platforming and level design of these stages, because they're personally my favorite aspect of these levels. Yeah, I know, that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't know, I just really like the platforming quite a bit. As to why I like it so much, well, it's mainly because of the Hedgehog's platforming capabilities, which are pretty unique compared to previous games. The Hedgehog, unlike Sonic's normal form, is able to stretch his arms out really far, which could be used to grab poles or ledges from far away. What I love about this is that when Sonic's pulling himself from a ledge, for example, you could time a jump right as you reach the ledge, and you'll actually carry your momentum and jump much higher. Because of this, you can seamlessly platform around these ledges and pulls with the right timing, and get through these segments in a fairly quick manner. It just feels so fluid and fun. Even if it's slower paced platforming, there's still tons of shortcuts and cool movement you could do to beat these stages quicker, or find secrets with how these levels are designed, which I just personally find super fun, and it's still something I love seeing in my Sonic games, regardless of how it's done. As for the Hedgehog's combat, I'd say I like it decently well. You have a good variety of moves you can utilize, and they all feel very satisfying to use. Some of these moves can be useful in different situations too. There's one you could do out of a dash jump, making it a good combat opener and movement option. Then there's the uppercut that could take enemies in the air, allow you to extend combos and do more damage. And then there's two different charge attacks, one hitting enemies around you, and the other only hitting one, but doing way more damage. And the list goes on. There's quite a bit of cool stuff you can do, even if it's not all necessary to do sometimes, or doesn't really defeat enemies that much faster than just mashing if I'm being honest. So yeah, I think the combat is pretty fun, and has a hidden strategy at least, but I wouldn't go as far and say it's as good or in-depth as Heroes' combat for me personally. I know that's probably also a hot take, but yeah, I still think Heroes is my favorite combat system. Though something I noticed before doing voiceovers is that there is a combo system, which depending on how many hits you get, you'll get more points and orbs to fill your UnWiished gauge, which does incentivize you to go more combo mad, which is nice. Holy sh**. I'm sorry, I know I spent an abhorrent amount of time talking about UnWiished, but I still need to talk about some of my main issues with the game. I swear I'll move on to other games soon though, I swear. Okay, so, with how much praise I've given the game, what in the world could my issues be then? Well, here's the thing. as much as I do like the nighttime stages, I still wouldn't say I love them, or not as much as the daytime levels obviously. I'd even go as far as to say I prefer the other gameplay styles in previous 3D Sonic games, like the treasure hunting or mech levels from Adventure 2, at least by a little bit. The reason that is for me is due to the balance in between how much you play both the day and nighttime levels, cause oh boy is it one-sided. The nighttime levels are just so much longer than any other levels we've seen in most Sonic games before. Now how can that be the case when I say there's tons of shortcuts and ways to beat levels faster? Well, though that is true, and you could technically beat them in a decent time, there's another factor in this game I haven't mentioned yet, and honestly, it kinda kills the pace of the game a bit. Factor being the Sun and Moon medals. These are collectibles that are scattered throughout the entire game and are required to get in order to progress. And the game wants you to get a lot, and I do mean a lot of them. So you'll be spending tons of time in the hub worlds and especially the nighttime levels to collect as many of these as possible, which ends up extending the length of these levels by quite a lot. They'll easily reach double digits, usually around 15 to 20 minutes, which is just way too long in my opinion. It kills the balance between the two gameplay styles, and even though yes, I do enjoy the nighttime levels regardless, I don't like them so much to where I want it to be 80% of the game, you know? It's really rough. Especially if it's your first time playing the game. It's a huge roadblock and forces you to replay previous stages, which just isn't fun. It's not a big deal in replays if you know what you're doing, but I still just dislike being forced to play the game like this. It gives at least a little less replay value for me than the adventure games or Heroes. That's personally my main gripe with the whole game, but I also have a couple other issues too, mainly with how UnWiished played on original hardware, because not only did it run like complete booty, but it also had extremely long loading times, almost to a somewhat similar degree as 06's load times. This also was a big part of why this game felt like it had a huge pacing problem to me, though thankfully with the recent release of the UnWiished Recompiled, you can play the game on PC with super fast load times and consistent frame rate, which definitely made the game more fun to play this time around. Now, I know this is a fan-made port of UnWiished and not an actual official version of the game, so I don't want it to count too much towards my overall opinion on the game, and I still enjoyed UnWiished when I played it on my PS3 anyways. Just maybe now I enjoy it a bit more on PC, or quite a lot more. Really, any of my other issues with UnWiished at this point is mainly stuff that bothered me in my first playthrough, like not knowing that it's only worth leveling up the Werehog instead of Daytime Sonic as an example. If you keep the Werehog too underleveled, it'll make the nighttime levels much harder and longer to beat, whereas leveling up the daytime stuff barely has much effect on your experience. Just an odd decision to even give Daytime Sonic a leveling up system to begin with. But here's the thing, most of these flaws just don't bother me when I play the game anymore, besides the Sun and Moon medals killing the pacing a bit. It's a game that I now get tons of enjoyment out of, but it absolutely has a difficulty curve and things you have to know ahead of time to make it fun. Despite some of this game's faults though, I still really love UnWiished. The highs are just way too high for me to ever say I dislike it. But its replay value still isn't as high for me as my other favorite 3D Sonic games either. So because of that, where do I rank it on my tier list? Honestly, I think I'm gonna still put UnWiished in top tier, because I still love it as I said before, but I gotta put it behind the adventure games and Heroes. Once again, I love UnWiished to death, so don't feel too offended by this. I just value replay value and pacing a lot in my Sonic games too. But also as I said before, the ordering of each tier really isn't that big of a deal either way. Well, I guess I'm still not done talking about UnWiished just yet. We still got the Wii and PS2 version to go over. Thankfully, I only have to talk about the gameplay with this version, since pretty much everything else like the story and music is the exact same, so I won't be spending nearly as much time on it thankfully. Also, I'll be referring to this version of the game as UnWiished, not only because it's simpler to say, but also sounds kinda funny, so why not? Okay, so, just like the HD version, this game still has two gameplay styles, both being the day and nighttime stages again. However, the level design and controls are drastically different, as well as the way the progression works too. First off, one big change I'm personally a big fan of is the change to the Sun and Moon medals. You no longer have to collect these in order to progress, making it so you can play the game at whatever pace you want instead, which I personally much prefer. You also get these medals by how well you play the stages instead of having to explore, giving you more incentive to beat these levels quickly, which I also really like. The medals now unlock these doors in the game's hub worlds too. These contain more puzzle-style rooms where you have to switch between the normal and Werehog forms. I actually found these to be super cool. I kinda wish the HD version had these honestly. You get to unlock pretty basic stuff like concept art, but also more extra lives to have at the beginning of the stage, which is pretty useful if you're stuck on a certain level. just gives you all the more incentive to do these. As for the actual gameplay changes, I feel more mixed on these, though the daytime levels are still pretty fun at least. But there are still some controls and mechanical differences, mostly small, but still different. My personal favorite change they added is that if you time a boost at the last second before the stage begins, you'll get a burst of speed right away, which I think is really cool. It's a lot of small stuff like that mainly. Really, the only major difference in gameplay is how the boost works. It's still an overpowered move, but unlike the HD version, the boost has to be used sparingly, because you can't just hold it down the whole time until your gauge depletes anymore. Instead, you have a set amount of boosts you can use, and each time you use one, you'll deplete a section of your boost gauge. This makes the boost more strategical to use than before, which I do like pretty well. At the same time though, the boost is much harder to control than in the HD version, so it's sort of a mixed bag for me. Sonic in general feels a bit more clunky in this game, but not too bad or anything, and the level design is still really solid and fun. So yeah, overall still a big fan of these daytime stages, they're pretty great. The real problem with this version comes with the nighttime levels, which I unfortunately feel are a pretty big downgrade from its HD counterpart. The combat has been pretty simplified now, way less moves and combos you can do, and it also feels even more mashy and mindless than it was before, which is not good. The platforming is also much clunkier too. Sonic just doesn't have the same fluid movement. The momentum you get from grabbing ledges is just wonky and less satisfying, making it harder to do cool platforming stuff. That isn't to say there's no movement or interesting tech, because the game still has guard cancelling, which was a tech that was in the HD version that I didn't talk about, but it does make the combat feel a little better, but still far inferior. And the worst part is, there's multiple nighttime levels for each part of the world now. It starts at 3, but eventually goes upward to 5 levels near the end of the game. The daytime stuff still only gets 1 level the whole way through, only some side challenges, that's it. This makes the balance between the two gameplay styles even worse than in the HD version, and the Hedgehog plays a lot worse too on top of that. This makes UnWiished a bit of a mixed bag for me. I still love the daytime levels, but the nighttime levels I personally found to be kinda mid. Not bad per se, but not something I particularly really like either. It takes up so much of the game, so honestly, I think I like this game just enough for it to not be in the same tiers as Sonic 06 or Secret Rings for sure. But I also don't love it enough to where I'd put it as one of my favorite Sonic games either. So because of that, I'm actually going to put it in mid tier. Finally, I put a game in that tier. Took long enough, huh? And it also took long enough to finally stop talking about UnWiished. Holy sh**. No! Once again, I apologize for how ranty this section was, though I guess every part of this video has probably been that way anyways. But similar to Heroes, I just had a really hard time simplifying my thoughts on this game. There's just so much to talk about for me. But finally, we're able to move on and talk about some other games. Ah man, Sonic and the Black Knight. Now this is a game that I absolutely loved back when I was a kid. The idea of Sonic wielding a sword and going back to the medieval times was generally the coolest shit to me. And you know what? I still think it is. I know this game got a lot of hate back in the day because of how out there of an idea it was, but I don't know. I always thought it was a cool concept for a Sonic game. To me, it doesn't have the same cringe factor as Shadow using guns and swearing at the very least. It still fits the more edgier theme of the franchise, but still lighthearted when it needs to be. I absolutely love it. I think what really sold me on this game's premise was just how well written the story and characters were in this game. Sonic himself was at his absolute peak as a character to me, having the more laid back and caring side he had in games like UnLeashed in 06, but also more of that cockiness from the adventure games. It felt like it had that perfect balance of the two. Jason Griffith's performance was also just incredible too. His absolute best, I'd say.
Yeah, I'll go get it. Be back in a flash. What's the big deal? Besides, I got this, didn't I? A knight never flees his foe, right? Isn't there more to being a knight than just serving a king? Huh? I'm out of here. People to save, you know? Yeah, maybe, but I play by my own rules. Remember that.
Fool.
Hang in there, kiddo. I'll get your folks back. I just gotta do what I've gotta do. That's all. Merlina, every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
This for me is my favorite iteration of Sonic of all time, or at least in the games, so that's already a great start. But the actual premise of the story is pretty deep too, even going into more darker topics such as death and living life to the fullest. Merlina, the main plot twist villain, wanted to use the power of Excalibur to make her life and everything around it eternal, even if it meant making the world a darker place. Sonic trying to stop her and giving her that heartfelt message to live life the best you can feels so in line with this franchise and Sonic's character. It's really done perfectly. The way the cutscenes were animated was super cool too, trying to go for a unique art style similar to Secret Rings to fit the theme and time period this game takes place in. Honestly, I'd go as far as to say that Black Knight probably has my favorite story in the entire franchise alongside Adventure 2 for me. That's how much I love it. The game's soundtrack is amazing too. It focuses very hard on rock with the perfect blend of encouragement and badassery, as well as the occasional more somber and atmospheric music too. I'd even say this game may have my favorite set of lyrical music in the entire series, or at least it's in the top 3 or 5. Night of the Wind, With Me, Fight the Night, and other songs are just so damn good. This game's overall vibe in general is top tier for me too. Really, the only thing that I'd say is a little weak in this regard is the level environments. Not to say they're bad, because they most certainly aren't, but I do feel Secret Rings had a bit more variety in the level themes and ideas. Even with that said, I still enjoy some of these areas quite a bit anyways, just maybe not as strong as all. Now, it seems like I absolutely love this game, right? I've pretty much praised everything about it so far, so what could go wrong? Well, if we actually look at Black Knight's gameplay, that's where my issues start to come in. The controls are definitely an improvement over Secret Rings though. Being able to have more control over how you move and when to stop, as well as jumping being instant now is absolutely a massive improvement. Really, it's everything else that feels a little weaker in my eyes. The controls can still feel a bit finicky. Sword swinging doesn't feel consistent and sometimes feels like the game has a ton of input buffer or something, registering inputs way later than I'd like. The level design is pretty simplistic now too, even compared to Secret Rings. Most levels don't have much interesting platforming or shortcuts, or even collectibles to find. Instead, it's really just a lot of straightforward hallways with tons of enemies to kill with the sword combat, and only occasional platforming stuff here and there. Combat also is pretty simplistic. You either spam the homing attack, or use the search gauge to time hits on a bunch of enemies. Every other move feels too inconsistent or not all that useful, making most of the game just about doing these same 2 moves over and over again. The most amount of depth this game gets is trying to get those 5-star ratings, which can be pretty tough and requires you to keep a chain of enemy kills for as long as possible. Outside of that, that's kind of all this game has for me gameplay wise. It's not necessarily awful, but it's definitely nothing special in comparison to other 3D Sonic games I like more. Despite the gameplay being sorta weak, I still can get some enjoyment out of it, especially on top of everything else that I already love about the game like the story and music. It's also like a 2-hour long game anyways, which I think is the perfect amount of length for me to still get some mindless fun out of the gameplay, and never have it overstay its welcome either. I guess there's other things I could say, but I think what I already said sums up my thoughts on the game pretty well. I know I didn't really spend much time on this game, but as I said, I don't really have anything more major to comment on. Look, I may not find Black Knight to be a particularly great game, but I personally have a soft spot for it anyways. A lot of it is nostalgia for sure, but there's just so many elements that I love about this game, I could never hate it either. So with that being said, I think if I had to rank Black Knight on my tier list, I'd also put it in middle tier alongside UnWiished. Definitely not a top favorite 3D Sonic game nowadays, but I still do like it alright, at least more than the games below it, that's for sure. Finally, we reached a new decadent era of 3D Sonic games, the 2010s. We got a different voice cast, writers, and arguably better quality control now. This should be a new and exciting era for Sonic, right? Not exactly. As you'll see as we go along, this was another low point for the franchise, and for me, it was a low point that lasted an eternity. The thing is though, this decade actually did start off pretty strong in terms of how good the games were. We not only got a really solid sequel to All-Star Racing with Transformed, but we also got Sonic Colors and Generations, both generally really solid games to many at the time. Though, now that times have changed, the fanbase has gone back on these games and now seem to hate them a decent bit. Well, maybe not so much Generations, but Colors most certainly has its detractors nowadays. I've even seen people go as far as to say it's one of the worst Sonic games they've ever played. As for how I feel about it, well, I absolutely have some gripes with Colors 2 that would further affect future games, but there's no world where I'd ever call it a bad game, far from it. As a video game, I think Colors is a pretty fun time. Let me explain. Actually, before I do that, maybe I'm mentioning this too late in the video, but most of the footage I've been showing has been me playing these games through mods or emulators. This includes Sonic Colors, which I'm playing a HD texture pack for on Dolphin, so it may not look exactly the way it would back on the Wii, or the Iffy Colors Ultimate port. I at least wanted to make that clear here. I'll put some of these mods and such I've used in the description below, in case anything you watched here interests you. Anyways, so where do I begin? Well, I'll actually start with the story and dialogue first, since this seems to be the commonly disliked part of the game now. And I'll be honest, yeah, I don't like the writing in this game very much either. Sonic was a series that was always more serious or slightly edgier than your typical platformer, trying to have deeper stories to tell. It felt very anime or shonen in how these games have been written for so long. Going from that to a more simplistic, self-aware haha jokey type story is an odd choice to say the least. Not that Sonic couldn't ever be lighthearted or have some humor, but it was always balanced with more serious stuff too. Now though, it just feels like it's trying too hard to be funny and sort of flanderizes some of the characters to me. Sonic especially got the absolute worst treatment in my opinion. Instead of being a cocky but heroic character that takes things seriously when the time calls for it, he now just makes everything into a joke. Barely ever taking anything seriously to a degree that is just too out of character to me. On top of that, I just don't find the humor to really land for me anyways. I did admittedly find some of it funny as a kid, like Baldy McNosehair.
To find Baldy McNosehair, of course. I'm totally calling him McNosehair.
Yes, I used to actually find this funny, I know. But nowadays, I just find these jokes either too childish or making fun of attributes of these characters I liked before. It just rubs me the wrong way. I know people would take this over the more serious plots in Sonic games, but I definitely wouldn't myself. I can even get more enjoyment out of the most edgy and all over the place plots like Shadow the Hedgehog 06, because at the very least, they're so bad and take themselves so seriously to where I find it really funny. Personally, I'll take that over a story that's trying so hard to be funny that just comes off as cringe. I could go on and on about all the other writing and story stuff that I dislike, but there's a lot of other things I'd rather talk about with the game that I actually do like. And even then, I can't say I absolutely hate the story, or at least compared to what we get in the future. I do enjoy the idea of Eggman taking over multiple alien planets, and making an interstellar amusement park in the middle of all of it feels exactly like a plan Eggman would come up with. The ending also had a pretty nice and more serious payoff too, so it's not all horrible. Okay, sorry, I'm rambling too much about the story now. Let's move on to something more positive, which for me would be the game's presentation. Similar to UnWiished, Colors has some absolutely beautiful environments, and the music in this game is fantastic too, as per usual. In fact, I really think Colors was the last game to have truly great environments across the board, that are all unique to this game, which is really unfortunate, because pretty much every Sonic game from this point forward would go to the nostalgic pandering path. But I shall save that for when we get to those games. Now it's time to get into the actual gameplay, and it's kinda weird to talk about. It is a boost game like UnWiished, having the same mechanics as before, but now without the Hedgehog or another gameplay style taking over, which was a big positive thing going for this game. Despite me actually enjoying the Hedgehog in UnWiished, this was absolutely the right call to make. It made the game feel more consistently solid from start to finish. However, things get really strange once you look at the game's level design. The 3D stuff feels a lot more simplistic than UnWiished daytime stages. The game really feels like it focuses on 2D platforming way more than 3D. So much so to where you can argue Colors really isn't much of a 3D platformer at all, and more of a 2.5D platformer in a way. Now, does that make the game bad? No, but it is a little disappointing how little 3D platforming stuff there actually is. In general, the game's level design is much more focused on exploration, trying to collect all the red ring collectibles and going for those S ranks. You mainly explore these levels with the new Wisp power-ups, all having different abilities you can use. I actually do quite enjoy using the Wisps, and going for those S ranks too, since it is very tricky to get that perfect score, taking a lot of practice and exploring to find the best route for said S rank. Now, this is great for, once again, the ranking system, which I'm a big fan of, but unfortunately, I feel like this game takes a bit of a hit when it comes to the speedrunnability of the levels now. Most stages in this game feel like more short, bite-sized levels, usually focused on 1 or 2 Wisp power-ups with some kind of gimmick. Because of this, levels end up being pretty short if you're solely focused on beating them as fast as possible, lacking as much depth, fluidity, or the high highs as previous games. Does that make Colors' level design bad though? No, it's just not quite my favorite style level design in a Sonic game is all. Because of how it's designed, I only ever replay Colors when I'm in the mood to 100% the game. Rarely do I ever boot it up to just play a stage or two like I do with UnWiished, the adventure games, or Heroes. Most of the levels in this game are just solid B tier stages, but never do they reach God tier status for me. So overall, I really like Sonic Colors, but I don't absolutely love it or consider it one of my top favorites in the series. Don't get me wrong, I still think the game is great, and I understand why it was a lot of people's favorite Sonic game. Because for me, I just don't think Colors reaches those high highs that my absolute favorite games in the series do. For that reason, I'm going to put it at the top of middle tier. Once again, I do really like this game, but it's just not quite a favorite for me. Sonic Generations, one of the most well-loved and received 3D Sonic games of all time, and deservingly so. In my opinion, this is just straight up one of the most consistently fun and high-quality Sonic games ever made. I know, I'm cutting it to the chase right away, but like, come on man, this game is just incredible. If we're talking strictly gameplay, this game is exactly what you want out of a Sonic game. There's two gameplay styles similar to UnLeashed, but unlike UnLeashed, the two playstyles are much better balanced in how often you play both of them. Classic Sonic is just as fast-paced as modern Sonic, and the level design for both has tons of pathways, collectibles, and crazy speedrun potential, making them the perfect Sonic levels to replay countless times. On top of that, the core gameplay for both is just super fun, modern Sonic obviously being the highlight. In fact, I might go as far as to say that it's my favorite version of the boost gameplay we've ever got. I know some people prefer UnLeashed instead, and I can understand why. I do think it's close between the two, but I don't know. There's just specific changes they made in Generations that I really like. A few examples being the stomp, stopping your momentum instantly now, giving you more control on where exactly you want to land for platforming, or the drift being less awkward to use, the boost and homing attack being on separate buttons, and some other quality of life improvements. The only thing I overall prefer about the daytime levels in UnLeashed is some level design stuff, meaning that levels feel a bit longer and more challenging. But otherwise, I think the modern Sonic levels are pretty much on par with the daytime levels. They arguably have even more paths and shortcuts too, making them just extra fun to speedrun or replay to me. As for the classic Sonic gameplay, I think it's also pretty great. Maybe not as good as modern Sonic, but still really good. My favorite part of the classic Sonic gameplay is how the spin dash feels to use. It sort of meets halfway between the adventure and classic Genesis games. You halt your momentum when you charge a spin dash, but unlike say the classic games or Shadow the Hedgehog, you could start charging a spin dash while running, making it less cumbersome to use. Really though, what makes the spin dash so great to me is how overpowered it is. Once fully charged, you can get an absurd amount of speed, making it really good for skipping large gaps, and even using slopes to your advantage to jump higher, exactly like how it worked in the older Sonic games. I'd still say Adventure 1 has my favorite spin dash overall, but Classic Sonic's in this game is not too far off. It's still an overpowered spin dash, so I still love it regardless. There are a couple gripes people tend to have with these levels though, mainly that it doesn't have the same physics as the classic games, and it's also solely focused on 2D gameplay. I could definitely understand both of these, but I guess my counter argument is that the classic Sonic gameplay is still awesome, even if it isn't exactly like the classic games or is only 2D. It still doesn't change the fact that I find these levels fun as hell, and that's what matters to me the most. Really, my main gripe with it being fully 2D is that the modern Sonic stages also still have 2D sections. So once again, this game ends up focusing a little more on 2D than 3D, though not as bad as Colors thankfully. The game also has a skill system, similar to Secret Rings, where you can unlock cool and beneficial mechanics to give you more customization and experimentation when replaying levels. It's really cool, and in my opinion, it was done better here than it was in Secret Rings. You actually unlock these by completing certain challenge acts or collecting every red ring in the stage, giving you more incentive to replay levels and try out the extra challenge stages. These challenge stages feel more similar to Colors' level design, being focused on one gimmick and being bite-sized in length, which I don't have an issue with at all, cause hey, we still got the super god tier main levels already. These smaller stages are just the icing on the cake to me. I love them. Heck, even the bosses in this game are pretty good. I forgot to mention them in the UnLeashed and Colors portions, but the bosses were also pretty decent in those games too. But I think Generations has some of the best bosses in any 3D Sonic game. Well, besides the final boss. That boss generally sucks. Outside of that though, every other boss in this game has amazing set pieces and just fun gameplay. Even that is pretty rare for a 3D Sonic game, at least up to this point. Really, this entire game is just pure fun. There's very rarely a dull moment gameplay-wise. The only part I generally don't enjoy in this game is the previously mentioned final boss, and that's it. I don't even dislike the Planet Wisp stages as much as most people. In fact, I actually really enjoy the modern Sonic stage of it, despite it being a bit too focused on 2D. Seriously, really everything about this game is fun to me, and that's really why I truly believe the hype around this game is warranted. That still isn't to say the game is perfect though. I should probably get into some of the issues people or even I tend to have with this game now. I think the most blatant one is that in hindsight, people now really dislike this game because of the obvious nostalgia pandering and how it affected the series moving forward. It absolutely is true that this game was what started this trend. But I'm going to defend Generations even on this point, because the idea of celebrating the entire series, revisiting levels from past games and reimagining them with new level design, visuals, and music all in one game was generally really novel at the time. Not only that, but the way they remade these levels was amazing. Set pieces, visuals, music are just top tier quality stuff. It's really hard to hate what they managed to remake here. The other main reason why I defend the nostalgia pandering too is, well, that's the point of this game. Of course, I could be wrong, but it always seemed like this was supposed to be a one-time thing. Just a huge celebration game, and after that, we'd go back to fully new ideas again like before. Unfortunately, that is not what truly happened, as we'll see with future games. But I don't entirely blame Generations for this. If anything, I blame Sega for taking the wrong notes from how well received this game was. Let's be honest, the reason why people love this game so much is because of how high quality and fun the game is to play. Nostalgia pandering was just a neat novelty on top of that. But Sega viewed it like they needed to cram nostalgia in every single one of their games since, which blows, but once again, I really think it's Sega's fault, not Generations specifically. It also doesn't change the fact that, well, Generations is just an amazing game, and at the very least, still has unique level design, so it still feels new in that sense. The only other complaints I can think of is the ranking system, story, and length of the game. I'll start with the length, because yeah, it's pretty short. But I suppose Sonic games were never long to begin with. But Generations is definitely one of the shorter 3D Sonic games if you're strictly playing from start to finish. I guess for me, I enjoy the consistency in its quality and pacing, as well as 100%ing the game being fun and giving you lots of content to work with anyways, so it really just doesn't bother me either. Really, it's the other two complaints that I agree with. The ranking system is way too easy in this game. Really all it takes to get an S rank now is beating a stage without dying. No longer does defeating enemies, collecting tons of rings, and other stuff matter much at all anymore. Even the time limit on how fast you need to beat a level to get an S rank is really generous in this game. It's just kind of disappointing, because this game nails replay value in literally every other way besides this. And as someone that loves the ranking system in Sonic games, it just makes me sad seeing it be so easy and boring to do in this game. There's just not as much incentive to master these levels outside of personal enjoyment anymore, which is still okay for me, but I'd love it even more if there was a more difficult and rewarding ranking system like past games. And the story is kind of a nothing burger, which sucks because you're literally time traveling to different time periods. And I think they could have made an awesome story out of this idea, but they just barely did anything with it. I guess the only plus side to the story being sidelined is that the cutscenes are pretty short and barely have much cringy dialogue to deal with. It's still boring, don't get me wrong, but I'll still take a nothing burger story over whatever the hell they were doing in Lost World or Forces, which I'll be getting to very soon. Besides all that stuff, that's kind of it for my issues with Generations. Look, I get the gripes people have with this game, but as I've stated many times, Generations is just so fun to play with barely any dull moments to me. That's something I can even say about Heroes, the adventure games, or UnWiished. As much as I love these games and consider them some of my favorite games ever, they do have flaws that make them harder to get into for the average player. Generations, on the other hand, is just a game I can easily recommend to anyone, and they'll more than likely have a great time with it. I guess with all that being said, it should be extremely obvious that I think this is a top tier 3D Sonic game. Once again, the ordering doesn't matter too much, but if I had to place it somewhere despite my praise, I think I'd put it in between Heroes and UnWiished. Okay, I know that sounds bizarre, considering I just mostly praised this game, but I feel like putting Generations here for two reasons. One, I do value when my 3D Sonic game has fully original environments and stories a lot. And secondly, I still personally enjoy fully 3D Sonic games the absolute most. As much as I love Generations, it's never been my number one favorite Sonic game for these reasons, despite it being incredibly high quality. Even then though, I still love every game in top tier pretty equally. Okay. I need to mention something important before I dive into my thoughts on this game. I said it before, but I don't want any of my opinions to come off as fact or make people feel bad for liking a certain game I don't. Truly, if you love Sonic Lost World or any other game I've bashed so far, that's great. I don't want to take that away from anyone. However, I'm also not going to sugarcoat or hold back my thoughts on this game. I want to say my honest feelings on it like every other game I've discussed so far. So, because of that, if anyone watching is a fan of Lost World, I would highly advise skipping this part of the video, where I guess you can watch it if you're really curious. But don't say I didn't warn you. So, with that being said, I hate Sonic Lost World. In fact, this game was the start of my decline in interest in the Sonic series for a good while. Sonic Boom taking over the franchise for the next few years, and the negative stigma around the series on YouTube and my friend groups afterwards was really the straw that broke the camel's back for me. But still, Lost World was the game that started to make me question if I liked Sonic anymore. Not that I hated the game, at the time. I just thought it was whatever, which was still unusual for me to feel that way about a Sonic game back then. I just couldn't pinpoint why I didn't like it though. But as time has gone on, and the more I go back to this game, the more I've realized why it didn't vibe with me, especially nowadays. So, why do I not like Sonic Lost World? Well, there's a lot, and I do mean a lot of reasons why. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I guess we could start with the game's absolutely atrocious story and writing. And when I say atrocious, I do absolutely, positively mean atrocious. This isn't a sorta cringy but tolerable story like Colors, or a Nothing Burger story like Generations. No. It's just a straight up obnoxious, extremely childish, and stupendously cringy story. In my opinion, it's my absolute least favorite story in any Sonic game. Dialogue focuses so hard on jokes and humor that only a 5-year-old would find funny. And if it isn't that, it's the characters whining and being assholes to each other the whole way through. Tails is an asshole, Eggman is an asshole, Sonic is not only an asshole, but also a complete dumbass, pretty much ruining everything around him and having the worst dialogue I've ever heard come out of his mouth.
That's funny, because I know the perfect spot to kick you.
Oh my gosh. Dude, this is already worse dialogue than Colors by a lot. Holy f***.
That was cool. Pun entirely intended.
Shut,
Hair.
dude. Bro, why?
Oh, and your ass.
Smash.
So nice.
Good one, buddy.
Thanks.
Man,
Bruh.
I don't like working.
Eggman's shell is gone.
That was a mistake.
Whatever. When is it a mistake to take your toys away?
Dude, why do they make Sonic such a dumbass in this game?
Rotten, sneaky.
Tails acted for the greater good. Let's make sure his sacrifice isn't for nothing.
I'm supposed to be the fastest, but I was too slow to save my buddy.
Bro. Stop. On top of that, Lost World also introduces my absolute least favorite characters in the entire franchise, the Deadly Six. Each of them pretty much represent a stereotype and nothing else. The pink dude is over the top crazy.
To bring in my A-game if I want to mop the floor with this funny butt.
Oh my gosh. The green lady's a sassy, whiny bitch.
Right, ruined my makeup.
What the f***?
If these stains don't come out, you're dead.
The yellow fat dude is always hungry and stupid.
Got an even bigger sandwich. Boy, sandwich!
Emo guy is, well, incredibly emo and pessimistic.
Does it really matter in the cosmic scheme of things? We're all gonna die eventually.
Gosh damn. The old man is wise, I guess. And Zevok is the head honcho, being big and tough, I guess. I don't even know, man. These characters literally have nothing else going for them besides what I just described to you. Genuinely zero depth to them whatsoever. On top of that, their designs are so unappealing to me. Most of them just look ugly and stupid, lacking any cool details or depth in their designs that previous characters in other Sonic games have. But what makes their designs and personalities even worse is just how much they rip off the Koopalings and Bowser. I mean, just look at them. The spiky bracelet should at least be an obvious indication of that. And really, this sort of leads to another huge problem I have with Lost World, which is how much it completely rips off Mario in so many ways. Some may assume I hate this because I just don't like Mario or something, but that is not true in the slightest. In fact, Mario is also my favorite franchise of all time alongside Sonic. Mario games have been in my life just as much as Sonic has. Heck, I even mentioned how Mario 64 and Sunshine are in my top favorite games of all time before. My issue with it isn't just that it's ripping off Mario games, it's that it's ripping off the worst elements of said Mario games. Or the good things it does try to replicate, it does very poorly. Maybe this is a hot take, but the Wii U era of the Mario series was not the best to me. Most games were extremely bland, boring, and undercooked compared to what we used to get in previous console generations. Mario was just playing it so unbelievably safe. And because Lost World came out during that same time period, and Sega wanted to appeal to Mario fans for some reason, it also tried copying the boring elements of those said Mario games too. Just look at the level environments, for example. Every level is just a bunch of floating, blocky geometry in the sky, lacking any connection with the world around it, or the story, or anything. They now truly feel like just levels in a video game and nothing else. Combine that with how each world is themed similar to a new Super Mario Bros. Game, being your typical grass, desert, beach, snow, forest, sky, and lava worlds, makes the entire game look so bland and way too video gamey to me. It's such a massive deal for me, because even the worst games I've talked about in this video, or most Sonic games in general, at least always had cool environments, visuals, and set pieces. But Lost World is one of the super rare exceptions in the Sonic series, where even the levels themselves look boring and awful, like it's a new Super Mario Bros. Game. It just sucks. It makes all the different camera angles and set pieces they try to pull off look lame, because the stuff around you is just so dull. It just makes every level extremely unmemorable, which once again, was never an issue in most Sonic games, but somehow is here. I could also list so many enemies, obstacles, boss fights, and other things this game has that are so blatantly Mario to where it's almost insulting, but I'd be here all day if I did that. But it gets worse. Whenever this game does try to do things that aren't Mario-esque, it's mainly just nostalgia pandering stuff for Sonic 1 and 2 fans. Most of the game just looks like Green Hill Zone, recolored for each world. And if the enemies aren't direct ripoffs of Mario, they're usually just enemies you've seen in Sonic 1 and 2. Once again, really nostalgia pandering to classic fans only. But it's not even good nostalgia pandering like Generations. It just feels incredibly lazy more than anything else. At this point, I should probably make myself talk about the gameplay now, because I can go on and on about the other stuff for ages. Gosh, the gameplay and level design in this game is so weird. The general movement especially just feels off for a few reasons. For one, Sonic has a run button now, and it doesn't even let him to go that fast to begin with, which is pretty dumb. Secondly, Sonic no longer has full 3D movement, making it so you can't be as specific with 3D platforming. And lastly, my personal least favorite, Sonic for some reason loses tons of speed when he slightly turns in any direction. Seriously, I'm not even joking, just look at the screen. The movement feels kinda awful in this game. Despite those complaints though, I will admit that there are some stuff I do kinda like, or at least in concept. Mainly the wall running, the sort of beta drop dash, and even bringing back old mechanics like the spin dash and the bounce jump. Some of these I actually find kinda fun to do, but some others I thought fell off. But really, the main issue I have with these mechanics is that the game barely makes you use them for anything. You could seriously go through the entire game without using any of these moves I just mentioned and be perfectly fine. And that's because the level design in this game is all over the place. These stages feel once again very Mario-y, focusing more on just traditional platforming or gimmicks that don't really allow for much fun speedrunning. There's certain areas in this game where you have multiple pathways to choose from, but the problem is that they're all equally as easy to get to. The point of multiple paths in previous Sonic games was that some paths were harder to get to than others, but those said harder paths would reward you by skipping sections or finding secrets. So having them all easily accessible and none really having much benefits outside of maybe finding a red ring collectible or an extra life just feels lame. Lost World doesn't even have a traditional ranking system either. It's only in the time attack mode, which as I stated before, I don't enjoy speedrunning these levels, so I don't ever feel inclined to get those S-rank times. Also, because of this, any kind of score you get by killing enemies, collecting rings, and other factors just doesn't matter anymore because there's no ranking system that rewards your high scores. It's completely pointless in this game. This pretty much makes it so the only reason I want to replay these stages is to find the red rings, and that's about it. I actually forgot to mention the wisps are in this game for some stupid ass reason too, and they're nowhere near as fun or at any kind of depth like they did in Colors. Most of the new wisps they introduce are also just garbage and not fun to use in the slightest. Really, I don't even know what they were thinking bringing them back to begin with. They literally add nothing to the game and have no plot relevance. It's just stupid, dude. Overall, the gameplay is a huge mixed bag for me. I think it's just way too all over the place, throwing random ideas at a wall and hoping it sticks, but it kinda just doesn't for me personally. I wouldn't really say the gameplay is the worst in this series, it's more so just extremely mid or below average. At this point, what do I even like about this game? Well, I suppose the soundtrack is good, I guess. Even then, it's still a low tier Sonic soundtrack for me. Literally every other game we've talked about so far as an OST I like significantly more. Lost World's soundtrack is still just once again kinda bland and doesn't feel as hyper memorable as most OSTs in the series. I probably have been too harsh on this game, but what I said is how I truly feel about it. I'm sorry, it just has so little to offer to me that I can't get elsewhere but better. It has a Sonic game, it almost has none of what made me love Sonic to begin with. Cool level environments and set pieces? Gone. Fun or sick new characters and stories to tell? Nope, it's unbearably bad. Level design built for Sonic's moveset and replay value that I enjoy in my Sonic game? Not really. So much of what I loved about Sonic was stripped away to the point where I even prefer 06 or Shadow the Hedgehog over it, simply because they still at least have a few aspects I really like about them. Heck, I'd even say I like every game up until now in concept at the very least. 06 might be bad, but I like the idea of expanding upon the adventure formula further with multiple characters, even if the gameplay ended up sucking. Shadow the Hedgehog's idea of having branching paths depending on how you play each level and diving deeper into his backstory is also a really unique and cool idea, even if, once again, I don't think it was executed well. With Lost World, it's like, there's so little I truly like about it, not even in concept. Look, do I think Lost World is the worst 3D Sonic game? No, probably not. Its core gameplay still functions better than, say, 06 or a few other games like Secret Rings, but I hate literally everything else about this game, so this ends up not really mattering to me in the long run. Because of all this, Lost World kinda just ends up being my least favorite 3D Sonic game. Once again, it may not be the most dysfunctional or buggy 3D Sonic game, but it's the one that easily has the least amount of things I actually like in the Sonic game. I guess you know where it's going at this point in my tier list. It's easily at the very bottom. I'm sorry. Once again, if anyone watching likes this game, I don't want you to feel bad or have what I say take away any enjoyment you get from it. It's just hard. I've played this game about 4 different times now, trying to give it another chance, but I always come out of it hating it more, so yeah. Lost World just truly rubbed me the wrong way more than any other 3D Sonic I've ever played did. I don't know if I want to say I've dreaded this moment where I had to play this game, because I'm kind of curious to play it again. It's been a hot minute.
I think you're itching because you need a bath.
Are you disrespecting me?
Maybe.
Bruh, I'm gonna be real, this is not a great start. Holy fuck. I have to play this fucking shit game.
Sorry you got stuck with a voice chip that looks like it was built by a 2-year-old.
This game's dialogue is made by a 2-year-old.
How much that bites?
Actually, nothing bites more than having to listen to this dreadful
I
conversation.
agree with you, Eggman.
Hey, man,
You bite!
Shut the fuck up!
And you! What were you thinking, Tails? You could have gotten yourself killed.
Wah. It's just complaining. This whole dialogue is wah. I hate you. Wah. It's not all this game's dialogue is. Shut up. This is such a downgrade. Holy shit. Dude, I want this to end. I don't want to play this anymore. I want to play literally any other 3D Sonic game besides this. Seriously, I'd rather play 06. I'm being dead ass. I fucking jumped! You fucking piece of shit! Dude, fuck you. Oh my god, I don't care. I jumped into it. I don't care anymore. I don't want to play that section anymore. I just want to stop playing this game. I just don't want to play this game anymore.
What? No flowers?
Dude, this is literally fucking Mario World, dude. Yes, yes, literally. Dude, it's just insane. I cannot believe, dude. Like, I actually can't believe how much this game literally copies Mario. Like, everything, every moment. What? Are you fucking kidding? What? He fucking flailed his hand around and fucking killed me. That's so bullshit. How was I supposed to know that was gonna happen to me? Dude. No, it is. Like, this is literally what Ian said. This is just New Super Mario Bros. 2 boss fight with fucking Bowser! Fuck! What am I supposed to do? Am I seriously supposed to make a Rubik's Cube out of this? Is that what I'm not doing this. I'm not. I'm done. I'm done. I'm fucking done with this fucking stupid game. I'm done. I can't.
Like I said, maybe there's worse Sonic games out there. I guess there are. Like 06 is a worse game, I guess, right? But I would rather play 06. I'm dead fucking serious. Like, this is a better game than 06. I don't care. I'd rather play it than this. I'm serious. This game just offends me. It runs you the wrong way. It's stupid.
Whoa, wait. You're telling me Lost World got a lower budget version on the 3DS? Yup, similar to UnWiished, the 3DS version has completely new level designs and different feeling controls, making it sorta its own game, so unfortunately for me, I kinda have to talk about it. I guess since it's still Lost World, the story, writing, music, and level environments are still the same, so that's already a pretty bad start for me. As for the gameplay and level design, however, definitely different to say the least. Both in bad and, surprisingly enough, good ways too. Sonic himself has pretty much the same moveset, but he feels much faster. Like, he doesn't lose speed when turning directions, and his general movement is much snappier and faster paced. I actually kinda like the way Sonic plays in this game, at least compared to the Wii U version. And heck, the level design even takes advantage of some of his new abilities a lot more. Like the wall running, for example, is something you actually have to do in the second level in the game, and it's surprisingly pretty fun. Yeah, no joke, I think the first few levels in this game are just genuinely pretty fun to play, period. The level design has a more Sonic feel to it, having harder to take shortcuts and even an actual ranking system, which gives these stages some replay value this time. No joke, these few levels alone are way better than anything that was in the Wii U version in my opinion. Even the wisps are much more fun to use, especially the new electric wisp that actually complements the speedy nature of the gameplay, which is once again quite surprising to me. However, things really take a turn for the worst once you get further into the game. Level design suddenly gets way more gimmicky and becomes pretty damn long for boring and tedious reasons. Now, these levels have you do some really dull tasks, like pushing around giant fruits, going into enemy gauntlets with incredibly slow, simplistic, and crappy combat that wastes your time, and some levels even get very maze-like. Absolutely everything that made the previous levels good just gets thrown out the window to me, and what we get instead are possibly some of the worst levels in any Sonic game, worse than anything in the Wii U version even. After the first desert level, I feel like there's only like 2 or 3 other levels in the game that have the kind of level design that I like. Every other level is generally really bad. This makes the 3DS version of Lost World a huge mixed bag for me, at least strictly talking gameplay and level design. It's both somehow better and worse than the Wii U version at the same time. It's kind of baffling to me, and really, that's all I really have to say on it. It's just an incredibly inconsistent game. This makes the game pretty hard to rank for me. It still has most of my issues I had with the Wii U version outside of the gameplay stuff, but it does generally have some pretty decent levels that I enjoy, so I don't even know. I guess the argument I have to make for myself is that every game I've talked about has at least a couple levels I like in them too, so it doesn't really make the 3DS version all that more special. I guess for that reason, I'll put it in between 06 and the Wii U version, I guess. I don't really know, man. At this point, I just want to move on and talk about a different game. Whoa. Maybe I should retract that last statement. Actually, nah, I'm still glad we moved on from Lost World. This may be a bit of a hot take, but Forces isn't my absolute least favorite 3D Sonic game. As in, I at least like it more than Lost World. I know. I'm sorry to most of the Sonic community for saying such a heinous thing. But hey, doesn't change the fact that Lost World is still incredibly mediocre. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm not a big fan of this game either, like most. But unlike Lost World, I don't really have that same intense hatred for it. In fact, Forces doesn't really make me feel much of anything, to be honest. Maybe it's because I've already seen all the hate videos when the game came out. Also the fact that I didn't buy it till like 5 years later on a Steam sale, so I already knew what I was getting myself into when I finally got to play it. Honestly, it's kinda hard for me to say much about it that hasn't already been said. I'll do my best to try and say my piece. Something I'll already give to Forces is that it's at least sorta trying to be a Sonic game again. It has some actual lyrical music, a more serious plot, more traditional fast-paced gameplay, more set pieces and visually pleasing areas, a new villain that has a way better design than the Deadly Six, and other stuff that I expect in a Sonic game. Sounds great in theory, but the problem now is that none of these things are executed very well at all, or are just incredibly underwhelming to me. The story, for instance, is quote-unquote trying to have a more serious plot again, but it was done so incredibly poorly. The writing is still that cringy, jokey, self-aware humor stuff we've seen in the previous few games, and when it tries to have more serious stuff happen, it pulls it off terribly. The game will tell you that Eggman took over the whole world and has tortured Sonic for several months, but then you watch a cutscene and it doesn't look like the world's been conquered at all besides for a few levels, nor does it show the side effects of Sonic being tortured. He still acts like nothing happened, which just makes absolutely no sense. Doesn't help that most of the game doesn't even have typical cutscenes a lot of the time, and instead have these dialogue boxes of the characters bantering, make it so you don't even get to see a lot of what transpires in the story to begin with. It's just incredibly lazy and boring to watch or listen to. Even Infinite, the new bad guy of this game, was done dirty too. His design looks genuinely pretty cool, and the idea of him being super powerful sounds sick in theory, but in execution, he doesn't really do a whole lot of threatening stuff. And he even comes off as kind of pathetic. His entire backstory is literally him getting kicked around by Shadow and getting called pathetic. It then has a hissy fit over it. It's admittedly funny as but I still would have preferred him, actually being a good character with a reasonable backstory. He also just kinda leaves near the end of the game with no fanfare, I guess. I don't know. This whole character is so underwhelming. I could go on about how characters like Tails and others were ruined even further, and classic Sonic being from a different dimension is incredibly stupid too. But I don't know. I kinda just feel like leaving it at that, to be honest. Really, the story is just lazy, underwhelming, and doesn't appeal to either the people that like the jokey dialogue of the 2010s, nor the people that like the serious plots of the 2000s, at least from what I've seen online. But hey, I can still tolerate the story more than Lost World, so I guess I'll give it that. Doesn't really mean much though. Then we get to stuff like the level environments and set pieces, and these are just once again underwhelming too. Most of it is just nostalgia pandering crap, using Green Hill Zone again, as well as bringing back Chemical Plant Zone and the Death Egg. Again, just pandering super hard to people that only like Sonic 1 and 2. The few new level environments in this game are super hit or miss too. Sunset Heights seems cool at first, but still uses Green Hill assets and geometry, making it still feel pretty dull compared to the other city levels in Sonic games. Mystic Jungle is just a jungle with casino and pinball stuff just kinda thrown in there, not really connecting well with the environment itself. Once again, it just feels like nostalgia pandering to Sonic 2. Really, the only good new level aesthetic is Metropolis, which is sorta similar to Grand Metropolis from Heroes, but it still feels like it stands out on its own, especially with the color choices, mainly being white and light blue. I absolutely love the way this area looks, and I really wish we got more levels that were this beautiful and unique to look at, but unfortunately, this really is the one exception in the game. Then now finally, we get into the gameplay, and just like everything else I've talked about, it's underwhelming. I feel like at this point, most people know how crap the level design is especially. Yeah, it's bad. It really just plays itself so much of the time, and handholds you to where it's really hard to mess up or do anything creative speedrun-wise in most levels. The game sometimes has occasional pathways too, but it feels so bare bones and easy to get to, it does not feel satisfying or rewarding at all. Even the collectibles are pretty basic and easy to get compared to previous games too. Combine that with how simplified and stiff everyone plays in this game, it makes Forces feel so dull to play through. It feels like you don't have to put any effort into learning the game mechanics or level design because it's so straightforward and easy, so why even do so to begin with? Doesn't help that most levels are really short too. They feel like they barely get much time to shine before they're already over. It makes Forces feel like such a nothing burger Sonic game. Most things this game tries to do has already been done much better before, especially comparing it to the last 3 Boost games. You want a game with a more serious plot and big scope? play UnWiished. You want a game that's well paced and has infinitely better levels and gameplay, including classic Sonic? Play Generations. You want a game that has the whiffs and more well-hidden collectibles? Play Sonic Colors. This for me is truly my main critique with Forces. I have barely any reason to play this game because I can just get the same experience but better elsewhere, as I've said before. Really, this leads to Forces only having two standout strengths to me, one being the soundtrack being pretty good. Not amazing, but still some solid stuff. And the other being the custom avatar character. The idea of making your own character in a Sonic game and having them run alongside Sonic himself is a cool idea, but this alone isn't enough to carry the game for me. I guess the Wisp-on weapons they get to use is also pretty cool in concept, but in my playthrough, I only used the fire whips because it was already so broken anyways. That is admittedly me not diving as deep into the Wisp-on stuff as I probably should have, so maybe there's stuff I'm missing. Overall, Forces isn't a game I hate, but it's also not a game I ever see myself going back to, just because it barely gives me any reason to. It's just a boring, dull, and underwhelming Sonic game, and honestly, that's all I can really say on it at this point. People probably expecting me to go on a tear with how bad it is, some with the Lost World or other people's videos on Forces, but I just don't have that same hateful energy as others about the game. Look, I get why people hate it. I'm sorry if my overview on it disappointed anyone, but I guess for me, I don't feel Forces is an interesting enough game to want to bash on super hard in the first place. Maybe that puts me in the minority, but I don't know. I just think this game is super mid as all. Not absolutely horrible or my least favorite Sonic experience, but it most certainly has the least to offer, I feel. I guess going back to Materialist, I'd probably put Forces in low tier, maybe behind 06 for me if I had to order it, just cause I can at least still get both more ironic and unironic enjoyment from that game, I guess. I don't know. Gosh, this has felt like it's gone on for an eternity, hasn't it? We're pretty much reaching the climax of this video and franchise thus far. Though, this for sure ain't the end of the Sonic series as a whole, because this new era has really sparked hope and excitement that I really haven't seen for the 3D Sonic games since, well, Sonic Generations back in 2011. Sonic Frontiers was the start of this, and this game genuinely made a lot of people happy, including myself. I had a great time when I first played Frontiers, especially with so much stuff that I've wanted to see improved upon for so long. But admittedly, some people have kinda turned on this game a bit, and I also got quite bothered more and more by some of its major flaws too. This made Frontiers a really hard game for me to decide on whether I truly love it or not. But now that I finally replayed it again for this video, I can say with a good amount of confidence that I still do really like this game a lot. But at the same time, my issues I had with this game are still true, and I will very much go into deep detail on them, because they're very important things I want Sega to fix for future installments. I may get harsh at times as a warning, but remember this is coming from a place of love for this game and franchise. I just want what's best for 3D Sonic games, so I'm going to say how I truly feel. It's going to be really hard to say my full thoughts on this game, but I will do the best I can. So, the main selling point of Frontiers compared to previous games is that it's an open world platformer, a first for the series. It sounded like a cool idea, but at the same time, I always felt mixed on Sonic going open world for a lot of reasons, especially with the footage we saw of the game before release. I was a bit worried about how the open world stuff would turn out. Thankfully, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, the open world gameplay was probably the most fun part of the game, but it still has some issues that I worried about that sorta came true too. It's complicated, but I'll try to explain. I think the thing that really ended up working out great with the open world gameplay is just how fun it is to run around and collect stuff. Maybe it's my bias towards collectathon platformers, especially movement-based ones. Once again, I love 64 and Sunshine, as well as Odyssey. The reason why I love those games so much is because of how you can use the movement at your disposal to collect things faster or do cool skips in the more open areas. Frontiers feels the same way for me, but now with Sonic's gameplay instead of Mario, and I honestly really love it. It just has such a fun and satisfying gameplay loop. Though I'd say in terms of how Sonic plays, I have more mixed feelings on it. On one hand, Sonic is so much better to control in terms of pure platforming. He feels very responsive to what direction you want to go and exactly when you want to stop yourself, which is really nice considering how the past few 3D Boost games didn't feel as precise. However, even though the controls have improved, the physics on the other hand have gotten a bit worse. The way Sonic interacts with the terrain in this game is quite wonky, but not in a way that's super helpful or fun a lot of the time compared to other 3D Sonic games. It's mainly super inconsistent when it comes to using the terrain to do cool skips. There's moments where I want to do a boost jump off a ledge, and sometimes I'll run off them just fine and get sent flying, while other times I run straight down or lose all my speed after jumping out of my boost, which just feels really off. Even an old ass game like Adventure 1 was able to nail these physics just fine, so it's a bit disappointing to see it not be as good in Frontiers. The thing that makes this worse is that it was an even bigger problem before the updates. You literally lost most of your speed when jumping out of a boost at all times, which felt absolutely horrible. But thankfully, it did fix it mostly. But there are still moments where it just doesn't work for whatever reason. It's weird. Doesn't help the fact that the normal boost speed you have is just really slow. Thankfully, you can get a much faster boost when you have max rings, and the side loop move lets you easily obtain rings quickly, which is nice. It still is a bit of an inconvenience when you lose rings and have to do the side loop thing every single time though. I just wish the max ring boost was, I don't know, the main boost speed in the game to begin with. Once again, there's a lot of iffy stuff with the gameplay here, but it's not bad enough to where I hate it or anything. I still really enjoy the core gameplay and the actual controls are still some of the best in the series. I just wish the physics and actual speed of the boost was a lot better. As for the open worlds themselves, I feel a bit mixed on them too. On one hand, I think the actual level design of all the different platforming challenges scattered about is really fun. It's focused on speed and going as fast as you can, which is the kind of level design I want. But on the other hand, I'm personally not a fan of the actual visuals and level environments of these said open worlds. The worlds themselves just feel very empty with very little visual flair compared to previous games to me. Almost all the actual level design and platforming are up in the sky above the open world environment. Doesn't help that the floating platforms, springs, and grind rails look exactly the same in every world too, making you feel like you're doing the same song and dance the whole time you're playing. And when this game does try to have different architecture, it ends up looking a bit tacked on to me. I get these are supposed to be homes and things built by an extinct and ancient civilization, so it's supposed to look weird, but I don't know, it just looks too similar to like Breath of the Wild shrines or random assets thrown in there. It doesn't hit the same way as, say, the ancient robotic factory in Secret Rings. The robots in the factory itself still have an ancient look to them, while still feeling like a real place to me, whereas I don't get the same feeling with the structures in Frontiers. Plus, Secret Rings still has multiple other more uniquely crafted areas that feel very distinct from one another, and also still feel like real places. Frontiers, on the other hand, barely has much visual changes. The first world is a big empty field of grass. The second world is an empty desert with the same platforms and architecture. The third world at least feels the most unique with the volcano and stuff, but then the last two worlds are just more empty fields of grass again. I don't know, maybe I'm being too harsh and rambly about this honestly, but I just wish these worlds had more in them. I want more unique environments and platforming, and for these worlds to not feel as empty either. Make things look more visually interesting and connect the geometry and level design better with each other like we've seen with almost every other 3D Sonic game. These open world areas also lack the traditional set pieces and memorable moments that have always been with the Sonic series for so long too, which was a big concern I had before the game came out, and it sorta came true. Thing is though, I wouldn't mind this if the cyberspace levels had the unique set pieces and environments instead, but unfortunately that's really not the case either. Oh boy, the cyberspace stages. I know I've already been harsh on the open world, but at the end of the day, I still get tons of enjoyment playing in them despite my issues. But the cyberspace levels, I can't say the same for. In concept, the idea of these are awesome. The open world stuff is already great and does a good job extending the length of the game without feeling like padding. But then you also get the traditional Sonic levels you can unlock in said open worlds on top of that. Sounds like a perfect idea. The cyberspace levels weren't executed as well as I would have liked them to. For starters, you can't use the max ring boost, so you're stuck with the slow-ass normal boost. Secondly, the large majority of the level designs are reused from previous games, like UnWiished, Generations, and Adventure 2, which causes so many issues for me. Since the boost is so slow and doesn't even have a hitbox on it, as well as the physics not being the best, it makes playing these older level designs feel a lot worse, since they were not built for Frontiers' controls in mind. On top of that, level environments are just Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary, so it's nostalgia pandering again. The only sort of unique environment is the city levels, which I guess is cool, but that's about it. Like seriously though, who wants to play a stage like Skyro from Adventure 2, but with worse physics, and none of the visual flair, music, and set pieces and instead looks like Green Hill Zone? Most certainly not me. Not only does this make the cyberspace levels not feel unique, but it also gets rid of the charm of these older levels. The only time I really appreciated these stages were when the level design was unique. Even then, that was a pretty rare occurrence outside of the DLC they added later on. Still, it makes the cyberspace levels have such little replay value and memorability, which is a huge deal for me, because those are two very crucial things I look for in a Sonic game. It's just really disappointing, especially because I do like the extra missions you can do in these levels too. Once again, it still feels lame knowing I could play better versions of most of these levels elsewhere. Look, I know I've been extremely negative about this game, probably too much, even though a lot of these problems do genuinely bother me. But despite all my complaints thus far, when I went back to play this game for this video, I genuinely was having a blast. I think I really am just a sucker for open world movement based 3D platformer games like this. They're like a drug to me. The gameplay loop is just so addicting, even with all those core elements missing that I really love in my Sonic game. I told y'all my feelings on this game are very complicated and all over the place. I do truly think Frontiers' formula has so much potential, and even with my issues, I still found it fun somehow. It just makes me more harsh on this game, cause man, imagine another open world 3D Sonic game like this, but with mainline levels on par with the best 3D Sonic games, the open worlds having more interesting environments and platforming to interact with, and some fixes with the physics and gameplay. I truly think if they fix these things for the next open world game, it would probably be the best 3D Sonic game ever made. That's how much potential I think this formula truly has. You get the longer length of Frontiers, but the top tier qualities of previous 3D Sonic games too. How amazing would that be? Unfortunately, Frontiers isn't that game though. I still love it for what it is, but it makes me wish the game had a higher budget to reach those heights. It just makes me want Sega to improve on this formula so badly. I really don't want it to end with this game, nor do I want them to repeat the same mistakes this game made too. Though now I'm talking like I'm done saying my piece on this game, but we're most certainly not done yet. We still haven't discussed about the combat, boss fights, and story yet. Gosh damn. The combat I don't really have much of an opinion on. It's pretty simplistic and in my opinion, not as good as Heroes and even Unleashed combat system, but I suppose it works for what it is. You don't really need to fight bosses or enemies all the time much anyways, so even with the combat being kinda just okay, I don't really mind all that much. The story I have much more to say on. Thankfully mostly really positive stuff too, cause finally the writing has changed for the better. No longer are the characters annoying and flanderized. They feel a bit more like themselves again, and the dialogue is generally pretty damn good. Sonic takes things more seriously again, while still having a bit of cockiness and confidence at the same time. It finally feels really well balanced. Even Sonic's voice direction has changed, now having a more deep voice.
Tails? Amy? Oh. Whew. Looks like I'm the only one who made it out of that. Whatever it was.
It's pretty weird, I'll admit. I still think I prefer Ryan and Jason's voice work, but I don't necessarily mind the new voice either. I'll at least take it over whatever it was in the 2010s, that's for sure. Sonic's interactions he has with Tails, Amy, and especially Knuckles are just great. It feels like Sonic has a real, genuine relationship with each character, and the tone for all the conversations are just perfect, both being serious with some occasional jokes here and there. Sage is also a new character introduced in this game. I think she's pretty cool. I like her design, character development, and her relationship with Eggman too, though it never got expanded upon too much, but I do dig the idea of Eggman having a robot who really cares about his family. Honestly, my only issues with the cutscenes at the very least is just the animation quality. Similar to other things in this game, the animation feels very unfinished or low budget at times. Some cutscenes can look okay, while others have the characters completely stilted, and it just looks off. The game also tries to add a lot of new lore to the series and really sick boss fights, which like everything else, I feel mixed on. The supersonic boss fights against the Titans were awesome, with tons of memorable moments and kick-ass music to boot. These are definitely the major highlights of the game. My only major gripe I have with them is that once again, the animation quality is a bit lackluster, making those hype moments in these fights look a little less cool than I would have liked. It's also pretty easy to cheese these bosses if you just spam the stomp move, because it deals hella damage. And lastly, the lore stuff. I feel conflicted on it, at least as of now. Chaos pretty much having its own species from another planet sort of retcons some stuff with Chaos being a mutated child, which I'm not really a fan of. At least to my knowledge, I could definitely be wrong on this, but it seemed like they retconned this, so I don't know. The Chaos Emeralds also being from space is a pretty massive lore drop, which I really don't know how to feel either since we don't really know much else about it as of now. I think these are at least really cool ideas though, and I'm curious to see how they expand upon them in the future. Unfortunately, the thing that really disappointed me the most with this game is how much I didn't like the main villain. I know that's also probably a super hot take, but I don't find the End to be a very interesting or intimidating villain. They try to make this thing like it's the strongest of all the monsters we've ever seen, pretty much wiping out the entire Chaos species and destroying their home planet as well. It comes off as super terrifying, and I was ecstatic to see what this all-powerful thing looked like. So many previous Sonic final bosses have had such badass and terrifying designs to them. Considering that we've had multiple Supersonic boss fights so far, I was really hopeful that this new final boss and design would blow me out of the water. But then I finally got to see it and wow, seriously? This is the terrifying, all-powerful villain that they've been alluding to this entire time? Maybe I'm missing something here, but I'm just gonna be honest. This is my absolute least favorite design for a final boss I have ever seen in a 3D Sonic game. It's literally just the moon with a purple filter on it. Am I seriously supposed to feel threatened by this? Because I genuinely don't at all. Look, I have heard the argument that the end is supposed to be this entity that you can't even fathom, and this moon form is just our own perception of what it's supposed to be. At least that's what I've looked up online. Once again, I could definitely be wrong. I guess that's fine, but couldn't they have come up with a better design than this? Even the moon from Majora's Mask at least has a face on it to make it more intimidating. I'm sorry, but considering how amazing every other final boss design has looked since Black Knight, I was really expecting something on that same level. I suppose the fight itself is okay though, even if it's just a shoot 'em up, which is an odd choice to say the least. It doesn't feel nearly as climactic or hype as I would have liked it to have been though. At least it doesn't even hold a candle to Planet Robot's final boss, which had an infinitely better presentation and reveal at the end. The only good thing about this climax for me was Sage sacrificing herself at the end, which was pretty sad, especially for Eggman at the end, seeing that Sage didn't come back alive. Though he did technically revive her back in the end, but let's just ignore that. The game also got DLC, adding the Spin Dash in the Final Horizons campaign, which I did mostly like, but I think I've said enough as it is about Frontiers. Well, actually, I do want to mention the Spin Dash because it's super overpowered and pretty fun in this game. The way it interacts with the terrain is much better than how the boost handles it, so this addition does give Frontiers a bit more replay value for me, even if the Spin Dash might be a tad too OP at times, but still does sort of fix some issues with the controls of physics. Look, I do really love playing this game, I truly do. The strengths are very, very high for me. Mainly most of the story and open world gameplay was really great. But this game also has a lot of flaws that personally really bother me, or have a really hard time looking past. Once again, I would love it if Sega tried this formula again, and fix all these issues I've mentioned, but I guess time will tell till that day comes. I know making top tier Sonic levels is a very difficult task, especially having to do that on top of making more lively open worlds and better presentation. But I truly think if Sega was able to nail these few things for the next open world game, it'd be one of the best Sonic games ever made. The thing is, maybe my ideal vision for this style of game is just too much to ask or is impossible to make, but I'd most certainly like to see Sega try. I really would. I guess now I gotta rank Frontiers on my tier list. Man, I just don't know where to place it at all. I do enjoy the game a lot more than the middle tier games, but I also think the flaws bother me more than the top tier games too, so you know what? I'm gonna cheat and make another tier again. I really can't help myself. Frontiers is a game I love, don't get me wrong, but it's also disappointing in many other ways too. I can't justify putting it in top or middle tier, so that's how I have to place it. I do apologize if I did such a poor job describing my thoughts on Frontiers. It really was super difficult to make this part of the script, easily the hardest out of every game I've talked about. I really do have a love-hate relationship with this game. I really love a lot of stuff about it, but really dislike certain other things about it too. But somehow, I still really enjoy my time with it overall. I don't know, this game is just weird for me. Sorry once again for how scatterbrained this whole section was. It really was that difficult for me to make. Heck, I even felt like I held back myself from saying more on the game. There's just that much stuff I have to say on it. Especially with Tails, Knuckles, and Amy being playable characters again too. There's just so much, but I've already talked about this game for way too long, and I just want to move on to something else. I'm so tired at this point. This video's probably gone on for way too long. But there's just one more game we have to talk about left. Well, here we are. We finally reached the most recent 3D Sonic game to come out, or at least by the time I made this script. Shadow Generations. Man, I cannot lie, I really think we're ending this video with a bang. Shadow Generations is easily one of the most polished and fun Sonic games I've ever played, and I think it's just as masterfully crafted as the original Sonic Generations too. It may sound like I'm exaggerating a bit, considering this is supposed to be a side game similar to Bowser's Fury, and look, no offense to that game or anything, but Shadow Generations blows it out of the water for me. It seriously just feels like Shadow's own version of Sonic Generations, and really, I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. The core gameplay and level design, similar to Sonic Generations, is absolutely top tier stuff in my eyes. Shadow feels more similar to Frontiers, but unlike that game, the boost has a hitbox again, and you still feel like you're going fast in this game. Still not quite as fast as UnWiished or Sonic Generations, but I don't personally mind if it's a tad slower, especially because the platforming controls are much more precise like Frontiers, which I prefer. Really, my only complaint control-wise is that you don't go as far jumping out of a boost again, but there is tech that makes you keep your speed from the boost after you jump, so it ended up not being much of an issue anyways. All the new gameplay mechanics they added that were made for Shadow are just so fun to use too. Whether it's surfing on a weird manta ray thing, swinging around these orbs and swimming in goop as a squid, or using chaos control to stop everything around you, including things like missiles you can use as platforms. There's just so many cool mechanics that give you lots of ways to replay these levels, trying to find new shortcuts or collectibles you missed before. The chaos control is especially awesome. Since you're stopping time, that means it stops the clock as well. This makes speedrunning the levels individually very unique compared to other previous 3D Sonic games. Not only are you trying to beat the levels as quickly as possible, but you're also trying to kill certain enemies, or find item capsules that fill up your chaos control gauge throughout the level too. Let you stop time itself and save even more seconds off your time. Being able to route the best way to save time this way in each level and playing it perfectly is just so fun to do. It also helps that the level design is fantastic too. Levels have tons of pathways and secrets, and I do mean tons of them this time around. Kingdom Valley and the later Radical Highway levels are especially great examples of levels that are just full of secrets and pathways, making them some of the most fun levels to replay and speedrun in any Sonic game. And heck, the 3D levels in this game are actually fully 3D! No forced 2D sections at all. Instead, they make the 3D and 2D levels completely separate, which I honestly prefer. It really allows them to focus hard and give you both 2D and 3D platforming equally, unlike Sonic Generations. Heck, even the hub world is a big 3D open map instead of a 2D one, which I also hugely prefer too. It feels like a more polished version of the open zone gameplay from Frontiers. The level design is actually connected and built with the environments in mind, leading to much more interesting platforming to me. It feels really weird saying this considering the hub world is still in the white space, which you'd think would be a more empty and bland area to roam around in, but somehow it really isn't. But it also has infinitely better levels than the cyberspace stages too. Really, Shadow Generations feels like a bite-sized but more polished version of what Frontiers was trying to be, and I really love it. I could even praise the boss fights too, which I think are much more fun and well designed than even Frontiers is, even if I do still like the supersonic boss fights. Getting the S rank on these can generally be pretty tough too. There's a genuine speedrun ability to some of these bosses to a certain degree, which is really nice. It also helps that the animation quality in these fights are really good too. In general, the animation quality and set pieces are so much better now. Honestly, some of the best in the entire series. The first time I saw Black Doom transform Space Colony Arc into Radical Highway while playing seriously blew my mind. The levels themselves just have super cool moments in general, like using chaos control to beat up a giant missile coming towards you, or watching as a train chasing you from behind explodes, or watching as the Death Egg robots destroy things around you, and so much more. This is the kind of set pieces and level identity that I sorely missed from Frontiers, and I'm just so happy to see more of it again with Shadow Generations. The story, though short, was also pretty damn solid. Shadow being able to see Maria and Gerald again due to time travel, and his interactions with them were genuinely so sweet. The ending in this game especially just hit me so damn hard in so many ways. Shadow realizing he can't change the timeline and save Gerald and Maria from their eventual fates was just so heartbreaking. The last thing Maria says to Shadow, as well as him shedding a tear similar to when he did in Adventure 2, seriously made me bawl my eyes out. And yes, I said it, I credit the ending to this game. That's how much of an impact it had on me. I could go on about other stuff, but just know that this game really revived Shadow as a character for me. Pretty much since the 2010s or possibly earlier, Sega made Shadow an overly edgy or angsty character for the lulz, and I absolutely hated this direction for his character for so long. It seemed like it'd never end too, because he still acted like that from the early IDW comics I read, making me pretty much lose all hope in Shadow's character anymore. But this game seriously proved me wrong. They made him such a badass, but still deep down a caring person with specific people, which is always how I liked his personality best. Just seeing my childhood favorite character finally act like himself again just really hit me so damn hard. I can't even describe it to you, man. The prologue animation they made on YouTube too was also just so good. Okay, I'm sorry. I know I'm just gushing like crazy, but this is just how I feel about this game, man. I love Shadow Generation so damn much, even with it being a shorter side game. Really, my only problems with the game is very few and far between. The ranking system is still too easy, which still sucks, I guess, and, it does rely on nostalgia and reusing level themes from previous Sonic games. Again, which also kinda sucks too. However, unlike Frontiers, Lost World, and Forces, I don't really mind it as much in this game. I know that just sounds like me being crazy biased towards this game, but I do generally have my reasons. Really, it comes down to the fact that Shadow Generations is a bundled game alongside Sonic Generations. As I've said before, it's supposed to be Shadow's version of Generations, which is a game all about celebrating the series' past, so it makes actual sense to bring back and reimagine older stages. Even though Chaos Island and Sunset Heights probably shouldn't be there. But the other 4 are still levels we've never seen remastered before either. It's not like we're seeing Green Hill or Chemical Plant Zone for the millionth time, so in that sense, it bothers me less once again. Plus, the level design is still brand new, similar to Sonic Generations, so it still felt like its own experience compared to the original versions of these levels. Even with that said though, would I have rather got a full-on Shadow game with brand new level environments and longer length? Yeah, of course I would, but I highly doubt Sega would have put that much effort into a full-on new Shadow game. I could be wrong, but I do truly feel remastering Sonic Generations was just a good excuse to make a shorter, but still super fun Shadow game. And you know what? I'm totally fine that they went with that decision, especially because they could have just done a Sonic Generations Ultimate anyways, but instead we got this, and come on, you can't tell me you would seriously rather have a horrible port of Sonic Generations over a minorly changed port with pretty much a brand new game alongside it, would you? I know I'll definitely take what we got any day over that. Gosh man, I know I pretty much just praised this game once again, but I really couldn't help myself. Seriously, this game combined with Sonic Generations has to probably be the best 3D Sonic package you can get out there. In fact, if I had to recommend the average person a 3D Sonic game, it's definitely gotta be Sonic X Shadow Generations. This isn't to say it's my personal favorite 3D Sonic game though, but it's definitely close, or at least tied with the other top tier 3D Sonic games for me. So, where do I rank Shadow Generations then? Well, I think it's of similar quality to the original Sonic Generations, but I do think Shadow Generations just gets an edge over it because of the much better story and hub world. So, I guess I'll put Shadow Generations right above it. Once again, I love every game in top tier pretty equally, I truly do. So, yeah. That's pretty much all of my thoughts on the 3D Sonic games. These games and the Sonic series as a whole really mean a lot to me, as you can obviously tell. I truly hope I did an okay enough job explaining my thoughts on everything, or at least that the video was tolerable enough to watch or listen to. For anyone that actually watched this video at all, I truly do appreciate you listening to me ramble about stupid Sonic stuff, and I really do mean that. This video took a really long time to make. And though I don't expect it to get much views past maybe the triple digits, just the idea that anyone even watched this to begin with really means a lot to me. So thank you to anyone that watched this video, even if it was only bits and pieces or the entire thing. I truly appreciate it a lot, as I've already said. This was the video I wanted to make the most on YouTube for years now. I even made it with the intent of it being my last essay video I'd ever make. Especially because, like I said at the very beginning of the video, I don't enjoy editing all that much, and especially doing voiceovers, as you could probably tell throughout the whole video. However, I'm going to spend the last bit of this video talking about my future making YouTube videos, because I might have a change of plans. I want to give some time and see how I feel, as well as watch how this video performs and if anyone even likes it in the first place before I truly make any decisions. But as of right now, I might still be interested in making more essay videos in the future, even despite how long and insanely tedious it was to make this video. Though if I do, don't expect a new video for a long while. I really want to spend more time doing other stuff like completing my massive backlog of games that has pretty much been piling up because of this video taking so much of my time. YouTube is only my side hobby at the end of the day. I don't want to make it my #1 focus and priority, especially because my channel is so small anyways. I really only want to do it for fun. Because of that, I probably won't upload videos very often, and when I do, it will not be super long like this video was. This was a once in a lifetime exception. I really want to keep my videos fairly short instead, like around 10 or 20 minutes long. I'd only do 30 minutes or longer if I really have that much to say on a certain topic. I think that'd end up being much better because it gives me more time to do other stuff, and actually have a damn life as I've said before, but also because I could focus a bit more on making the voiceovers or maybe even the editing a bit better too. I know this video has its problems, especially my voiceover work. It was pretty damn bad, and it really needs improvements, so I think shorter, maybe more higher quality videos would be much better moving forward. Of course, there's always a good chance that I won't make any more videos after this too, which is honestly fine with me. But if I'm able to balance working on shorter videos, as well as do other stuff in my life, I think I could actually keep making more videos. But I'll have to see as time goes on. I really can't promise that, especially with how I feel right now after making this behemoth of a video. For now, I'm just relieved that I finally finished this video, honestly. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say left. I guess I could do the typical YouTuber thing and ask for people to comment or subscribe or whatever, but I don't want to be cringe and beg for that stuff. But hey, if you do want to comment your thoughts on the video, or 3D Sonic games, or sub if you're genuinely interested in any video I make in the future, then cool. I don't know why anyone would be, but hey, I would appreciate that. Anyways, I've wasted your time for long enough. Thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully, maybe, I'll see y'all in the next video. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.